Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode 148. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my son, the red hat wearing, but not that kind of red hat.
Oh, shit.
Chris Raygun.
Oh.
Whoa. Well, we got to make sure that people don't think you're wearing whatever you want to wear. But for the audio listeners, he's not wearing a MAGA hat. So don't freak out. It's not that kind of red hat. No. I'm surprised you wear that thing because I feel like red hats are kind of like ruined, right? Not whatever you believe or don't believe is fine. But I'm saying like when I see a red hat, that's what I think.
It is funny because like I think that as well, but it's I mean this isn't really helpful for audio listeners, but it's a very specific kind of red that is like it's just on the cusp of like that's not a MAGA hat.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. It's like a scarlet red. Let's say a crimson red.
Crimson.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you, Chris. How are you?
I'm well. Good. Doing good. Feeling good.
Good.
I actually ate today, so I'm not going to be hungry by the end of this.
Yeah, people have been making fun of you. I saw a YouTube comment, I think, that was like, Chris, at the end of every episode, I'm starving to death. So he's a famished boy.
I am. I need my nutrients.
Growing boy.
Yes, definitely. And that other voice, of course, Dustin Furman, the executive producer of Last Stand Media. Dustin, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I have some setup changes. So I've got a standing desk now that I'm going to see if I can stand the whole episode.
Oh, my God.
You know, it feels great. It's like energizing being able to stand and podcast. I love it. But I don't know if I can make it the whole show. Yeah,
is it the desk that goes up and down? Like you can bring it up and down with you? Yeah,
it's motorized though. I'm not hand cranking that shit. No way.
You're hand cranking something.
Well, you can't see the below the waist on the video version, so you never know.
Who knows what's going on down there?
Yeah.
It reminds me, I think I've told the story, but at IGN, they gave us a bunch of standing desks where they offered to give us standing desks and also treadmill desks. Do you guys know those? Like it's like where they just go really slow. And so you're just walking. And they asked me, and I'm like, are you joking me? You think I want to stand? And I literally asked, I remember asking Tal Blevins, who used to be like the president of IGN. I'm like, why can't I get like a recliner? And he's like, well, we're not buying those kinds of things. I'm like, these desks are like $4,000. I'm asking you for $1,000 recliner. But they wouldn't do it. So I would have been like, back in the office at IGN, it would have been great. Well, welcome all to our PlayStation podcast. We hope you're doing very well out there. Sacred Symbols posts each and every week, and you can get it early and ad-free on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. We have the biggest gaming-centric Patreon in the world, and that's all thanks to you. Of course, it's early ad-free access to Defining Duke, our Xbox podcast as well, done by Mr. Matty Plays in ACG. Knockback, the retro and nostalgia podcast I do with my brother Dagan each week. Lots of good content over there. You can get your comments read on the show, get your name in the credits, get early access. Like I said, ad-free access, and also access to Sacred Symbols Plus, our weekly supplemental podcast only for patrons. Last week was a good one, Challenging Colin 3. This was a tradition Chris and I started back when I was in California, actually, where we would have people write in and just specifically tell us how we were wrong about things. I'm gonna line Chris up for that in the coming weeks to do it on his own. It's, I think, more fun to do it by yourself because then people really tune in to you.
Yeah, it's more personal.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was a good one. I don't feel like people's arguments were as good as they've been in the past. I feel like I need you guys to step it up a little bit because I feel like I was batting you down. And by the way, I was smoking a joint during that podcast as well.
CBD.
That was what I was saying because people didn't believe it. Now I'll smoke THC. No, of course, but I really was smoking a CBD joint because some people were saying like, oh, it's CBD in quotes. I'm like, no, it really is because I'd be out of my fucking mind. I probably would have walked away halfway through the podcast and just done something else if I was smoking THC.
Just recorded for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it just would have kept going and it just would have been on this Riverside. We use Riverside to record would have been 20 hours long. So. Otherwise, merch at laststandmedia.shop if you want to check it out. We appreciate that. All fairly made in America, shipped in America by Americans.
Ooh.
Except for one particular shirt made by Indians. Not Native Americans.
Yeah.
Indians from India.
Yeah, that's different.
I wish that they would, because I still use the terminology Indian. In fact, as far as I understand, a lot of American Indians or Native Americans prefer the term Indian or Indian American. And but you think at some point they would have been like, and not Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
You're not where you think you are. They're not Indians. And at some point, maybe they would have been like, oh, we probably shouldn't call them this. That's how lazy. These people were crossing the ocean going into they had no idea where they were going, but they couldn't change the name.
Yeah. They're just like, else. Well, if we change the name, then we're wrong, and we can't be wrong.
That's exactly right. Very well said, Chris. We have a couple of corrections before we get into everything. Turd Ferguson, our old friend, wrote into us and said, hey guys, this is a question regarding MPD data. You mentioned last week that it's not that impressive that Miles Morales charted that high in MPD because it's only a $40 game. However, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't NPD change their tracking methodology from units sold to revenue generated a few years ago? If so, wouldn't that make it more impressive that a $40 game charted high, as it means it would have had to sell more units than a $70 game just to generate the same amount of revenue? Yes, Turd, you just punched me right in the mouth. You're absolutely right. So thank you for the correction. It is more impressive, and MPD does chart not based on numbers, but on money. Yeah. The other correction comes from Alex Landry. He says, hey, C-Men and the Big D. Quick correction on last week relating to the discussion of collectibles. Chris had brought up that collectible items in Uncharted should do something in the game. However, all the games indirectly give you points for the exact same things Chris was describing: concept art, gameplay tweaks, visual changes, and neither Colin or Dustin corrected this. That is true. I wasn't really even thinking about that. I got to be honest with you because I never care about that stuff. So I don't like go and look at concept art or like, making of movies. I just don't. So when I'm unlocking those treasures, because I thought about it later, Chris, and I was like, I feel like it did unlock something for multiplayer or something in Uncharted 2, but it wasn't the case. So yeah, we've cleared the record.
I don't know. The whole like here's some concept art to me still isn't really all that compelling because it's just stuff that you could just Google anyway. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's because I agree. I mean, it's kind of 6 of one and half dozen of the other because we're talking about something a little bit more than that. But he is right in the main. And so, Alex, thank you for writing in with that correction. Other stuff, by the time people hear this, Returnal from Housemarque, the only second AAA PlayStation 5 exclusive to be released so far, is out. We don't get review copies nor request review copies, so there will be no Returnal discussion on this podcast. I'm sorry if that disappoints you. We'll be playing it along with the rest of you, so we'll have lots to say about it next week, but it is worth saying that it is getting excellent reviews in the high 8s on Metacritic. Not a huge surprise. I think it's going to be just fine at that $70 price point. And there is a new Ratchet & Clank State of Play posted. If you want to go check that out, I will not be watching it. I don't want to see any more of the game. They named the female Lombax, which I was even disappointed to hear because I was kind of trying to just get through and see as little as possible. So I'm not watching that, but there is 15 minutes of gameplay in that State of Play. Did you watch it, Chris?
I watched a little bit of it. I mean, in hindsight, the name of the Lombax is pretty obvious. Like if I think most people could have guessed that name, really, if they thought about it for like about 10 minutes, if they cared enough to guess. But I saw a little bit of it. It looks gorgeous, man. Like it looks really good on compressed video. So like I can already tell it's going to look amazing, like directly off the console. But I kind of stopped watching halfway through because I was like, I will play this. It's fine. Like, I don't need to see any more of this.
How are you feeling about Returnal? Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It kind of snuck up on me. Like I knew it was on its way, but like for some reason I didn't think it was like literally as close as it was, even though it was obvious. I don't know what. I think maybe this month doesn't have a 31 in it, I guess. And I was kind of expecting
30 days have September, April, June, and November. I have to literally do that every time. Like for years. I still don't know. I have to be like, and I have to do that little weird thing. I can't believe I even remembered that. When I was a kid, I'm like, it was like when I was learning how to tie my shoes. I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to learn how to do this. And it was the same thing with I was struggling. You know?
I used to think that about driving. I would watch my parents drive and I'd be like, there's no way I'm going to be able to figure this thing out.
Yeah, there's still no way I figured it out. So, although every once in a while I do drive, it's fine. Dustin.
Yes.
Are you excited about Returnal?
Oh yeah, I'm very excited. It just here's the thing though. Right now is that we're gonna get into what we're playing, but I'm actively playing a game that I'm enjoying very much. I have another game that Amazon is going to deliver to me tomorrow. That's Returnal. And
then you're going to say Pokemon.
Well, there's that too. I'm holding off on Pokemon just because it's never going to go on sale. So it's like, who cares if I play it now or later, whatever. And then the week after that, we've got Resident Evil.
I know.
And so it's just like you gotta keep up right now. So
it's picking up.
You know, I'm gonna try to have to play both Nier and Returnal at the same time. And then when Resident Evil hits, it's just I gotta double down. More games.
Yeah, it's gonna be I forgot to add something I was just playing. I needed to put that in there as well. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting because now we are gonna have to make some choices again. I think we've gotten so used to, in some way, riding, just hanging out. Game comes once in a while, no pressure. But it is exciting that it's going to change now, and we'll have some things to put into these new machines. Dustin, did you see the Ratchet footage?
No, I am. I'm just gonna hold out. I think I'm with you, Colin.
Me too.
I'll see you when it's ready.
Yeah, that's the way it was with. I mean, that's why I'm so excited about Returnal, because I'm excited about that for lots of different reasons, but it's because I kind of just tapped out. I don't really have any idea what's going on in the game. So someone did try to send me this tweet spoiling it for me, and I'm like, this ain't my first rodeo, son. You all told me Abby was transgender. Remember that? Wrong. So, and I'm talking, of course, about The Last of Us Part 2. But yeah, it's very exciting. Props to Housemarque for a hugely high score. They are, I would imagine, if you went on, and I'm sure you can track this on Metacritic, I've just never looked, but I bet you they're one of the highest developers on average for releases. They don't make bad games. They don't even make good games. They make great games. I can't think of a game that Housemarque has made that's been, like, I think Nex Machina and Alien Nation were maybe like the weakest, and those are still great. So
Nex Machina.
Nex Machina was a little weird for me because it didn't seem to have the score chase mentality that Housemarque games typically did. It felt like what it was based on, which is Defender. And so, no, not Defender. What was it based on? Resogun was Defender. I can't remember what the other game was based on, but because they had the guy, it was Jarvis that helped them make it. But yeah, I'm excited to see how they do at the $70 price point, and if they maybe stay in this space, in the AAA space. So very exciting. Let's see what else we have to get through here, boys, before we get into what we're playing here. Oh, Dave Ramos wrote into us about this. Did you guys hear about this? He says, "Hey, Colin and Sons, not sure if you guys saw. Last Saturday, a battle royale was held between a bunch of guys named Josh. Based on a popular meme, the Joshes battled it out to be the sole holder of the name Josh. For the record, a 5-year-old won and was crowned the one true Josh." That's cute. It got me thinking, Colin, will you hold a similar battle to determine your one true son? Well, no, I have 2 sons. At least. Who knows who else is walking out there with the Moriarty seed that's been spread. That's disgusting. But did you guys see that, Chris? Did you see the Josh thing? I thought that was really funny. It started as like this meme, and then they all actually met at like these coordinates.
They actually did. I didn't know they actually met. That's crazy. I saw the Facebook group or whatever the hell, like the DM thing. I thought that was pretty funny. I didn't know they actually met. That's wild.
Yeah, there's some footage of it. It was like basically like them beating each other, like lightsaber looking things, I think. Did you see that, Dustin?
I did see it, but right now I'm more focused on the fact that you did not even acknowledge Maddie as one of the sons, and I'm pleased. So. Oh,
you're right. Oh my God. Well, that's what
fuck you, Maddie. You've forgotten about.
Now, I always talk about how I'm half Italian, but the other half is Irish. And as you know, Irish people have lots and lots of children. And it's a joke that, like they call it an Irish child when it's, like you have a kid in January and then another kid in November. And so like they're born literally the same year, which is funny. And so it's a joke amongst Irish people where I'm from on the island to make fun of moms and dads who can't even remember their own kids' names. And my own mom, who is Italian, she's not even Irish, she calls me Dagan, Dana, Allie, Colin every time she talks to me. Those are my siblings. She runs through everyone before she gets to me every time. Dagan, Dana, Allie, Colin. So
Jesus Christ. That sounds mortifying. That would mess me up for a long time, I feel like.
It sounds like an incantation in some way. What else do we have here? Oh, Andres wrote in and said, Colin, you say you don't like sweets, but you like milkshakes. Are you a liar? How do you feel about that, Chris? I love milkshakes. I also like Pepsi and Coke, but I say that I don't like sweets. Does it make sense?
No. You know what? I was going to give it to you, but I don't think it does. No.
Okay.
Yeah, if you like milkshakes, then you do like sweets. It's just you have a narrow amount of sweets that you like. Because milkshakes are amazing. Yeah, but I think I have like a little bit more of a sweet tooth. Like I love those powdered donuts.
Oh yeah, those are good.
They're so good.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Is like I think I do have more of a sweet tooth than I recognize. I think that I've been so focused, Dustin, on the things that I don't like,
right?
That I've not opened indeed my mind to the things I do like, because I don't like candy. I actually get grossed out by gum. I hate gum. It just grosses me out. And like, so you take these little things that are kind of the quintessential sweets and you're like, well, I don't like sweets. But indeed, I eat EL fudge cookies. indeed, I drink Pepsi.
Yeah.
Indeed, I drink milkshakes.
See, that the thing for me is that I know that I like sweets. Like, I love peanut butter cups. And
Oh, yeah.
On Easter, I like to get Easter candy and stock up and stuff like that. But, you know, I can't really do the full flavor pop anymore, or soda, whatever you want to call it. Like, the last time I had like a full flavor Coke or Pepsi from like a bottle, by the end, I was like, ugh. Like, I was ready, and I was ready to fall asleep. Like, there was just so much.
That's the diabetes kicking in.
I guess it must be.
I love Coke and Pepsi. I mean, I actually prefer Pepsi these days, which I know people think is sacrilegious, but I don't know. I love people. Chris, people say this Coke and Pepsi are too sweet for them, but I love just like, and we've talked, I mean, because we've gone out to eat so many times when I lived in California. I love like a burger and a Coke, you know, or like a piece of pizza and a Coke. Nothing else will do. Nothing else will do. If you give me a piece of pizza and water, that sucks.
Yeah, that's a really depressing meal.
Yeah,
that's like a prison meal. But like,
here's pasta and you know, and flavored lemon water. It's like, what?
Yeah, I'm more of a lemonade person myself. Like, I think that has like enough of the sweet and like the bitter. But like, I think with soda for me, it's just like when you get past the carbonation. And the fact that when you burp, it hurts and it feels like you're having an aneurysm.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
That pain. Yeah, I got you.
That to me is just like, when you get past the carbonation, the actual taste of like flat soda is pretty like underwhelming and just borderline offensive to me. Like, I'm not a soda person at all, which is probably the only reason I'm still alive, given my diet. But
yeah, I mean, you know. That's the thing is I have a can, sometimes 2 of Pepsi every night with my dinner. But since I only do OMAD, I just eat whatever I want for that hour anyway. So it's not, you know, so who knows? I might have diabetes, and I'll see you on the other side if that's the case. Dustin, this one's for you. Andy Cap wrote in and said, hello, team. Can we get an update on how Dustin is enjoying his new mattress? Worth the money?
Yeah. So I got the Purple Hybrid, which
this
is like
not an advertisement, by the way.
No, we're not sponsored by Purple, but I do have to say, I'm very much enjoying it. And I'm trying to remember what Chris said when we last discussed this, but it's like, it's worth spending the money to not wake up every day and feel like shit. And I wake up and I feel great. It's sometimes bad because I wake up and I'm so comfortable that I don't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
Again, it sounds like an ad, but I'm not. I'm very satisfied with it's the Purple Hybrid that I got.
You always want to splurge on your bed.
That's
you know?
right.
That's
we've already
bed.
established that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've established that. Well, good. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Yeah, I mean, I know there's nothing that's going to make me feel good in the morning. Yeah, you can put me on a cloud, and I can sleep on it. And I'm still going to wake up and be like, oh god.
Well, yeah, if they put you on a cloud, you'd be terrified.
I know. Oh my god, I'm 40,000 feet in the air.
Oh my god, the air is thin, and my synapses are not firing. What's going on?
And it's also negative 150 degrees.
It's a very uncomfortable place to wake up.
I used to really be obsessed when I was a kid, though, about, I remember asking my mom so many times, like, can you stand on clouds? Like, I did not get it, you know? And it wasn't like from Mario or something. Like, I just didn't get how you couldn't land on them.
Yeah, because they had a physical form and shape. You'd assume that you'd be able to step on them.
Right. I hadn't taken chemistry yet and understood the molecular workings of air and gases and all of those things. And frankly, I still don't really understand any of it. But
the true tragedy of the human condition is never knowing what a fictional cloud will feel like.
I know, right? Oh my God. It's a really good point.
Wow.
I got to say, sometimes, Chris, a broken clock is right twice a day, is it not?
Only once in my case. But.
Yes. We have a kind of a serious inquiry here from Hard Frog on Patreon. I was curious what you guys think of this.
Mm-hmm.
He says, howdy, fellas. This is mostly for Colin, but I would like to hear from the second C and first D as well. Colin said not to worry about what others are playing, which he understands and respects, but which I think he says I understand and respect. But as one of, if not the biggest PlayStation podcast, does it not make sense to be up to date with the latest PlayStation news and games? Not liking racers like GT is fine. That's Gran Turismo. But a lot of fans would probably like for at least one of the hosts to try it and talk about it. But letting trophies stop you from playing DLC of one of the biggest remakes of one of the biggest games in history is something I think a lot of us can't fathom. So I want to know what you guys think of this. Here's my mantra for the show. It's been my mantra for the show from the beginning. Chris knows this. Dustin knows this. But let's air it out and we can discuss it, is I really feel like we need to play only what we want to play. Always. It can never be an IGN-esque situation, and no offense to them, but I worked there, where we really had to keep up. It was expected. And it's funny, if you look at my trophies from that era, I play a lot of games. I beat some of them, but I play a lot of games. And if you look at my trophies now, I play fewer games, and I basically destroy all of them because I'm playing what I want and not what I'm expected to play. I feel like that's what makes our show special and what makes it good. It's the same thing with Returnal. We got some letters that were disappointed, like, why aren't you guys talking about it and stuff? And I'm like, well, first of all, we have nothing to say. We haven't played it. And second of all, we're going to talk about it when you're ready to hear about it. Are you really ready to hear about it right now? I don't think so. You haven't even played it yet. So I feel like we're in this interesting pocket, Chris, where we get to play what we want. It allows us to funnel our passions. And he says to me, like, shouldn't they be up on the latest news and games? Well, I'm not trying to be a douchebag in this regard, but I would challenge anyone to know more about PlayStation than me. So I think I'm up on it. It's just a matter of the games we choose to play. And so what's your feeling about that? Do you think we should be trying to, like with Gran Turismo or some, should we be trying to account for more games, or should we really try to be ourselves? Because I feel like it's the latter that makes this podcast more authentic.
I think the main thing here is that, like, if there's a game that we don't want to play and we play it, you know, and it's just something that's just completely out of our wheelhouse, something that's just like we don't care about, I feel like our opinions of it will be less valuable than somebody's opinion who actually is like looking forward to or has some working knowledge of that type of genre. If I went and played Gran Turismo as somebody who never really plays sim racers or you know, any of these types of games, what am I really going to say about it if I play it that isn't, it's a car game and it looks nice? You know, like, I don't know any of the real, I don't know how those games are made. I don't know, like, how the fans of those games engage with those games. I don't know how they talk about it. I don't know terminologies of that shit. Like, it would be pretty useless for me to talk about it if I just have no idea what I'm talking about. You know, as opposed to the games that as opposed to the games that we like actually actively look forward to and enjoy in genres that we're a little bit more familiar with. Like, I can talk pretty extensively about an FPS, you know, but like, what am I going to say about Balan Wonderworld? You know,
what can you say about Balan Wonderworld that hasn't already been said about Afghanistan? In the words of Dave Chappelle, it's bombed out and depleted. That's an oldie for people that know the Player Haters Ball. So I feel like, Dustin, what's interesting is kind of an interesting sort of happenstance, I guess, that I connected to this. There was that story that was kind of making the rounds from Polygon this last week, the website where they wrote about Titanfall, and then Respawn like made fun of them because they got like everything wrong about what they were talking about in the story. And I was thinking about that, not because I was like, I've been there where you have to like Wikipedia shit and like, you know, what the fuck you're supposed to do. But it kind of spoke to what the problem is, I think, which is people are being forced, round pegs are being forced into square holes. And so someone had to write a Titanfall story. They don't play Titanfall. They don't know Apex Legends, and they look like a fucking idiot trying to even talk about it. And then they get made fun of, and then this whole thing happens. I feel like that lack of authenticity can't be reclaimed. And I think Chris makes a good point. Like, we could play Gran Turismo, but dude, I remember playing Gran Turismo 5 in an event, and they were making fun of me at Polyphony because I was like riding the wall. You know, like I was playing like an arcade racer. It's like, what do I have to say about this game? It was like, so how do you feel about what, let me make sure I got his name. Hard Frog. That's not a very nice name. I don't like that name. But what do you think about his comments? Do you think we're doing it right, or do you think we need to find some sort of balance, better balance?
I think obviously there's always areas that any show or content creator can improve on. I mean, I don't want to say we're perfect, but in the wide world of the internet and content creators, if there's specific coverage about a game that you are specifically interested in, you should go to someone who likes that thing, who is interested, who is authoritative. And with PlayStation, I think that we cover a very wide variety of things. It's just not possible for us to cover and talk with authority on 100% of everything that goes on the platform. So that's kind of the beautiful thing about the modern content creation space, is that you don't have to listen to just us. There are many other great creators that we can recommend. Like, for example, I don't think, maybe Colin would, but like Wasteland 3, it's not the type of game. I don't think you'd like it, Colin. It's like a CRPG.
Yeah, I think I played the second one. That's In Exile, for people that don't know. Yeah, I think I played the one that came out like some years ago. I didn't like it.
Right. Yeah. So we can easily recommend like going to Mr. Matty Plays or ACG. They both love those types of games. You can go, check them out for that. So, yeah, you can kind of pick and choose where you want to go.
I think we're in the right space. Like I said, I think we're in the pocket, and I appreciate what you're saying, but I think you have to be careful about what you're asking for in this regard. As far as knowledge, news, analysis, industry stuff, we've got you covered. I really think we do that better than anyone else. Like I don't know like how much deeper it can possibly get in some ways in the way we talk about things. Of course, we're zany as shit. I mean, we just talked 10 minutes ago about mattresses and milkshakes, but I think we get that right. I think that game analysis is what I'm trying to get more into on Sacred Symbols Plus. And I forgot to mention it earlier with Sacred Symbols Plus. Next week's Plus episode is going to be an Outrider spoiler cast and review discussion with me and Mr. Matty Plays, where we're going to get really into the nuts and bolts of, particularly hopefully the nuts of Outriders. And that will kind of exist in its own package. So hopefully we can kind of hit all these angles. And as far as like Gran Turismo, or the rare exclusive that comes out, very rare, AA, AAA, second or third party exclusive that none of us play. It's very rare. And maybe we can do, like when Gran Turismo 7 comes out, maybe we find someone and just do a little interstitial with them so that the racing fans are more satisfied. But you're not going to get a game like that very often. I mean, we're over Returnal, Ratchet, Horizon, God of War. That's 4 out of 5 right now that we know about. So
what you're saying is, I am on Atelier duty. And,
yeah, you're on Atelier Ryza.
And you have to become a Destiny PvP champion.
Right, exactly. The thing is that we're not only going to play to our own strengths, we're going to play to each other's strengths. Right. So Chris is going to come play the JRPGs. I'm going to play the looter shooters. We'll let Dustin remain the weeb because neither of us, we're too self-respecting for that. But Hardfry, thank you for writing, and I hope that our response makes sense. And now it's time to talk indeed about what we're playing. Chris, I want to start with you. I'm very interested in this. It says you're playing MLB The Show 21, which, what?
Yeah, I am. It's a baseball game and it looks nice.
Yeah.
No. I did. I jumped into it just because, I mean, the barrier of entry with Game Pass. I am playing it on Xbox just because it's free. And it's like, why wouldn't you?
We said that 2 weeks ago. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And especially because like these aren't games that I typically go for, and it's like, yeah, well, if the barrier of entry is that low, then why not? And I jumped into it when my roommate Sweeney was with me when I was playing it, and we were in the living room. I was like, I don't know, I guess I'll try this out. I probably should. It's like a big deal, and I know neither of the other guys are gonna play it, and I feel weirdly compelled to try it anyway. And the second we were like flipping through like the stadiums and like going through the teams, like we were both like, oh, whoa. It's kind of weird feeling that sense of like familiarity from a game. It's like, oh, there's Yankee Stadium, the Yankee Stadium that I remember like growing up around. So in that way, it's like kind of fun, like the sports sim aspect of it. Nice. But I wasn't expecting the actual like moment to moment like gameplay to be as interesting as it was. Like I haven't played a baseball game since maybe I think the game that I showed a couple episodes ago, RBI Baseball 2005, I think was the last game I played. So it's been a while, but I was genuinely surprised at how well made like the mini games for each part of each position work, and you know the button mapping and just like the kind of the timing of like the little bars when you throw to certain bases, and it's like, this is kind of fun. I kind of get it. I quickly got into a cycle though of like, okay, so this is a lot of shocking repetition.
That's what baseball is.
Which I guess, yeah, exactly is what baseball is. But you know, I gotta say, for somebody who, you know, doesn't play sports games, doesn't really care that much about them, never really seeks them out. I kind of enjoyed it. Like, I kind of got into a rhythm, and like, I think about 2 hours had passed, and I was like, oh shit, I've been playing this baseball game for 2 hours, which is kind of wild. I didn't think that would ever happen, but I think it's good. I think it's a quality title. I think visually it's a little lacking. It's kind of, but that, I don't know, that might just be the Xbox version. But I noticed some weird, like, people's clothes like phasing in through their skin and shit like that. But
yeah, it's the first next gen version, so I assume it's gonna not be. I would imagine the PS4 and Xbox One versions are gonna be the actually superior or more stable versions of the games this year. But what was it like seeing the PlayStation splash screen at the beginning? A lot of people were sharing that, and it was interesting.
Very weird, very bizarre. Seeing Sony Interactive Entertainment pop up on my Xbox was a real trippy experience. Sweeney didn't give a shit. He was like, "Well, I don't get it. What's the big deal?" I was like, and I guess he's probably most people, right?
Yeah, yeah. It is a big deal. I was disappointed that, because they do that cool splash screen. I would assume this was a deal they made maybe with Xbox, but I was kind of hoping that they were going to put their characters in there, because they removed them. It would have been cool to like sneak Aloy and Drake in there or whatever, but it's just footage from the baseball game, which makes sense. But let me ask you this: will this in turn you on to the real game of baseball? Like, are you interested in checking that out more now?
I don't know. Like, well, I've always had like a passive interest in baseball because my parents watched it a lot. Puerto Rican household in New York, like I was pretty much forced into playing baseball when I was a kid. Like, there was no option. It was like, you're playing baseball or you live on the street. So like, I've always like liked baseball. Like, I've always like, I've been to like, I've seen the Yankees play like when I was a kid. Like, I think twice I went to Yankee Stadium, and it was cool. Like, I liked the experience of it. I don't think this is going to change my mind as far as like, oh, I'm going to keep up with things now, because as far as I'm aware, people are falling off of baseball specifically because they're like doing weird shit with the rules. They're changing. I think I heard somewhere, I think I was like listening to like Maddie and ACG talk about it, where they're like, apparently like if a game goes too long and there's extra innings, they start people off at second base. Like, I had no idea that was a thing. That's a baffling thing. Yeah,
they're trying. The big problem with Major League Baseball is their games. They're trying to make the games shorter. They're just too long. I mean, that's what. I grew up a huge baseball fan too in New York, a huge Yankee fan. I used to go to Yankee games all the time. I loved it. I love baseball in person because I love when the games take 4 hours and you're just in the sun and you're eating hot dogs and drinking and hanging out. It's great. But like when you're watching it on TV, or it's like very tedious and but I was surprised to see that in our document. So I wanted to follow up with that. MLB The Show 21 for free on Xbox Game Pass if you want to go check it out. Dustin, not surprisingly, you're playing Nier Replicant. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm playing Nier Replicant version 1.22474487139 ... ellipsis, and it's pretty good. It's interesting. What I like about this, and we've talked about it on the show, is that I think we have a question about it, but the fact that it's not a remaster, but it's not a remake. And so I'm coming into this fresh. I never played the original Nier on PS3. So it's cool because it's very much Yoko Taro writing and characters and stuff like that. So it feels very Nier, right, if you've played Nier Automata. But there's definitely some like lower budget PS3 jank. Not jank. That's not the right word. It's the beginning is like really slow. The stories can be a little bit fetch questy, especially in the first like 5 hours. But I think I mentioned this to you, Colin, on Twitter, is that the beginning has like this really strong story hook that is like really compelled me. And now that I'm close to 12 or 13 hours in, it's like really getting very good. And I'm very, very curious about where the story is going. And I'm pleasantly surprised. I was worried about Toy Logic, as we've talked about. They're kind of a little more, some of the stuff they've done has not been so hot, but I think their work on this, as far as the quality of the remaster, remake, whatever you want to call it, has been very, very good.
Cool. I was looking. Was researching now. That was the clickety clack in the background. When Kavia, who doesn't exist anymore, made the original Nier in 2010, or they launched it in 2010. I know that I had played it on PS3, and I did. I'm looking at my trophies, but I only played it for enough to get like 2 trophies back in like mid-May of 2010, and I have no memory of it. So I asked you on Twitter rather. I put out like a poll, but I made it so only you can answer it. Right. And I asked, and I read your advice, and I think I'm going to stay away from it for now, just because there's it looks good. It looks weird though, and yes. I like weird, but I think there are other things that are attracting me. But Justin Bryant wrote in about this, and I was curious what you thought of this, Dustin. He says, "Hey, CDC, as I've been playing Nier Replicant," I'm not reading the whole version number, "I've been thinking about Yoko Taro saying that the game is an updated version and not a remaster or a remake. It has the same problems as the 2020 original, like you said, with grindy side quests and spotty writing at times, but that's what makes the game a cult classic. And I'm happy that it kept all of the little blemishes that the original had, since it helps define what Nier is as a series. A weird passion project full of love while knowing its shortcomings, and is okay with those blemishes, as that's what makes this series unique and fascinating. Thanks for all that you do, and keep on keeping on." I was interested in this because I feel like it's pretty bold for Square Enix to say, like, we're going to release the older game that is inferior, and we're not going to do anything to fix it, really. And you're not really going to mind very much because you're such a Nier fan, as we anticipate whatever the hell they do later. Is that a fair analysis? Because I feel like Square is starting to push out games now pretty quickly that are remasters. They did this recently with Saga Frontier and so on. And so what do you think about Mr. Bryant's here, Justin Bryant's comment about not changing much, but that kind of being part of it?
I don't want to speak for the OG Nier fans out there, but my impression has always been that the original Nier was a really good story, really good atmosphere, interesting characters, but a lot of the gameplay, whether it's combat or stuff like that, the visuals, not so hot. So it's was a hard game for people to recommend, a hard game for people to get into that are, care more about gameplay. But it became a cult classic for those reasons. And so I really think this strategy of like, okay, we know the story's interesting. We know the music is fantastic. How do we take the really good parts and really focus on improving the stuff that people didn't like? And that's what I'm really curious about, like going and I need to watch like a YouTube video of like what combat was like in the original version, because I remember hearing complaints about that, and I'm playing it now. I'm like, this isn't the best combat I've ever played, but it's certainly not bad. I'm enjoying it. It's good. So I like this strategy, and it seems to be what EA is doing and BioWare with the new Mass Effect, is that they're like, okay, let's take the stuff that is really dated and really detracts from the core experience and make it, up to today's standard.
Yeah, very well said, Chris. Are you interested in this one at all? I know this is kind of doesn't play super into your wheelhouse, but I feel like Nier is one of those crossover games. Automata was anyway. I mean, its sales numbers clearly indicate that it's not the Atelier people that are playing it. Yeah. It's much more than that. Is there any interest from you?
I don't know. Like I played a little bit of Nier Automata and I liked it, but like I fell off of it like super quick. And I feel like a poser for jumping in now.
That's
like
right.
It's one of the, I'm not usually that kind of person, but this is like so outside of like my normal wheelhouse and so deep into this thing. Like even just going through like the history of this series was just like I look.
It's very complicated because it started as Drakengard and all that kind of stuff, and that series it's very confusing. Yeah, it is. And there's I think there's only 5 games, so it shouldn't be that confusing.
Yeah, I feel like the time to have jumped into it would have been the last few months where there was nothing coming out, and now that like Returnal's out, now that Resident Evil's out, or very soon to come out, I feel like I have to wait for another drought, which honestly at this point I don't know when we're gonna get, because it feels like the next several months are just packed.
Oh my god!
To the brim. Wait until
2022.
Shit.
It's going to be a shit show. Everyone's delayed games are going to come out probably between November or October of this year and June of next year. I think it's going to be a cluster.
Yeah, it's gonna be a mess. So like I think when the next time that there is time, I wouldn't be opposed to checking it out. At least with Automata, that was one that I played a little bit and I actually liked, and I got into it, but I just fell off like super quick. So if I could just pick up where I left off, which wasn't really that far into it anyway, so that'd be ideal.
Well, Dustin, you were gonna say something, I thought. No?
No, the only thing that I will add, just in the conversation of where should you start, because I know that's probably something a lot of listeners are thinking. They're like, there's this new Nier game. It's like it's before Automata, but it's not the first game because there's Drakengard. I wouldn't overthink the timeline too much, because Automata is like thousands of years in the future, and they actually went and added in the version update that just came out of Replicant, they added more connections to Automata in it. So you really can start at either one. And I have no clue about Drakengard. I know nothing about those games. I really am only invested currently in the actual Nier games. But
yeah, I'd be interested for them. I wonder if they're going to go back, because Kavi is gone, and that studio's been gone for 10 years. I mean, Nier actually shut that studio down, which is so ironic. Nier was the game that sold badly, and Kavi went away. So I wonder if they'll go back and try to re-release those or give context, because they're supposed to all be in the same series, and they have almost like what surprised me with this is with Nier, to me, seems like they have this developing, percolating, almost Kingdom Hearts thing going on, not with the cross IP stuff or how big it is, but rather like this very long and winding and confusing path between all these games that somehow connect. I think it's something. It's not like Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII. There's more to it than that. I don't know if they're trying to do something with it, but it seems like they are. So
I think a proper analogy, because Kingdom Hearts, you're getting into crazy territory there when you make that comparison. It feels more to me like in Lord of the Rings, most people know, I believe it's the third age of Lord of the Rings, and that's all they know, and that's fine. But there's also like the first age, the second age, where Sauron was doing completely different stuff on a completely different continent. And you don't need to know about that, but when you do, it provides additional context when you watch or read Lord of the Rings.
So because the Amazon stuff is the second age, right? And that doesn't take place. That takes place not on Middle Earth, but in like somewhere else. Or is Middle Earth the planet, or is that the continent? You know what? Don't even answer, because then we're gonna get a bunch of letters. What'd you say?
Middle Earth is the continent. Right. Sauron is one of the like lesser angels that's from like the Western, where like the Undying Lands or whatever. And so
I don't know
second age is when he comes. Okay, I might not remember this right.
You know what? Right.
Let's just stop.
Yeah. Just because I don't need Tolkien people writing, and that's like the last thing we need.
No, definitely not.
You know, God, I need a fucking hole in the head. So let's just leave it.
Yeah.
The way it is. How are you feeling, by the way? Standing up? You tired?
No, I think I'm gonna probably go another 20, 30 minutes, and then you'll see on the video they'll just go and slip. So I'll mute myself so you won't hear it.
Okay, cool. I want you to feel good. For real, you deserve to feel good. You deserve to have all of the day's stresses taken off of your shoulders, to escape persistent bodily aches and pains, and to find the sleep that eludes you. And a great way for you to get all that you deserve is to give Feels CBD a try. Here's the rub. CBD stands for cannabidiol, which comes from the marijuana plant. But unlike THC, which gets you stoned, and which is lovely in its own way, CBD is the component of pot that relaxes and calms, all without getting high. For real, CBD doesn't get you high, so your life won't turn into a Cheech and Chong movie when you partake. And I'm actually a Feels user myself, so I can tell you exactly how it works. First, you go to feels.com/symbols. That's feals.com/SYMBOLS, and take a gander around. Feels is a tincture, so it comes in a small bottle, and you place a few drops under your tongue to get the desired effect. Figuring out which potency you specifically want could be intimidating, which is where Feels' CBD hotline manned by real, experienced, and knowledgeable people can help you, if you need it. And better yet, becoming a Feels member means you can get regular shipments without having to sweat running out of your sweet CBD nectar. For real, my audience knows I'm an anxious mess, and I have a hard time sleeping. CBD has been a great help for me, specifically Feels, so let them help you out. It's hassle-free, discreet, and easy, and you're going to be really glad you tried it when you're feeling better and sleeping tighter. For real, try it out. Go to feels.com/symbols and become a member. You'll receive 50% off your first order for doing so with free shipping. See what CBD can do for you at feels.com/symbols. That's feels.com/symbols. All right, let's get into the news. Big news this week for Sony as far as how they're doing. Another week of celebration after many morose episodes of Sacred Symbols, so good for all of us. Number one, Sony has released new financial reports that give us an excellent primary sourced glimpse, finally, into exactly how they're doing as a company and how their most important internal brand, PlayStation, is performing in this new generation. The biggest news is hardware sales, of course. PlayStation 5 has surpassed 7.8 million units sold, with PlayStation 4 now at 115.9 million units sold. PS4 remains the second best-selling home console in history behind PlayStation 2. PS5, for its part, is now the fastest-selling PlayStation hardware of all time, and as far as I understand, the fastest selling game hardware of all time. A remarkable feat considering both its higher price and its severe supply constraints. For starters, PlayStation's annual revenue, apart from that, from March 31st of 2020 to March 31st of 2021, was some $25 billion. For context, Xbox brought in about half that much. This is even more than Nintendo as a company brought in. So the brand is very healthy. Sony is selling games too, lots and lots of them, like almost 1 million a day on average. In that same March to March timeframe, Sony pushed 338.9 million PS4 and PS5 games, from small indie titles to AAA offerings. This doesn't count free-to-play downloads. As noted by website Push Square, the PlayStation Store accounted for 69% of PlayStation's total revenue, meaning digital sales as well as subscriptions like PS Plus and PS Now are now subsuming physical game sales in a major way. Exclusives continue to cut their track too. 17% of games sold can only be played on PlayStation, the biggest titles being Miles Morales, The Last of Us Part 2, and Ghost of Tsushima during this time period. As for PS4, there has now been more software sold for it than any piece of gaming hardware in history. A staggering 1.577 billion PS4 games have been sold, surpassing the previous record holder PS2 at 1.537 million, according to Push Square. And speaking of PlayStation Plus, the service continues to boom and now stands at 47.6 million paying subscribers, which gives Sony roughly $2.4 billion in annual revenue alone. That's up 6.1 million subscribers in a year. To keep the good times rolling, Sony noted in a conference call, as relayed by website Video Games Chronicle, that they would be investing nearly $200 million into its own studios. External partnerships and even acquisitions could be in the works. Lots of news there, Chris. Big popping, I think, pieces of news. 7.8 million units sold. Supply constrained, doing that. Best-selling console after 5 months. Sony bringing in $25 billion, including, I think, $3 billion in profit, which is awesome for them to be able to spend this money we're talking about. That's still not even half as much as they would need to buy Bethesda, but it would be a start for them. And then, of course, massive attach rate. And hey, I thought this was interesting. 1.577 billion PS4 games sold. PS2 was number 2, 1.537 million or billion. That's insane because every PS2 game was physical. So that's incredible. That PS4 sales are actually not even nearly as impressive as PS2 sales because of the entire physical nature of the catalog. So how do these various numbers, how do they strike you?
I mean, it's good. You know, I don't think anybody could look at this and, you know, feel particularly doom and gloom about it. You know, this is a good sign for them, especially given, you know, how much negative press they've gotten lately. And I think it just speaks to how strong the brand is and how strong the community is and how strong the loyalty is to this machine. It is impressive that they managed to sell this much during a time where supplies were super constrained. It makes it all the more confusing, though, that we still have the line between generations not being so solid. Like, that is extra confusing in that sense.
It's very funny you say that, Chris, because Rob Kavazna wrote in about this. He says, "Dear Sacred Trifecta, it's official. More people have PS5s now than the number of PS4s available when infamous Second Son was released. So when can we expect to stop seeing articles and editorials calling for Sony to support their last-gen consoles until everyone can get a PS5? Do any of you three have friends without PS5s that have been actively looking for consoles since last November? Am I wrong for thinking that anyone with Twitter and the money should have been able to figure it out by now?" I think probably you're right, actually. I think that if you were really trying very hard, you should have found one by now. I don't think it's that rare. So I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because that came to my mind too. This cross-generational stuff makes no sense now because people are like, well, they need to dip into the PS4. Certainly they do, and they should. But the PS5 is outselling the PS4, and no one made that argument about PS3 back in the day. So that kind of annoys me a little bit. What do you think? Oh, that's for Chris, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
I should be more clear.
The silence. I was like, oh no, was it me?
No. I mean, I understand. I think, making games is more expensive than it used to be. That's a factor in this, obviously. So they're if you see an install base of people with like over 100 million, consoles out in the wild and over 100 million players to reach, I can see why even like people who are trying to make next gen titles might want to double dip and might want to go back, kind of like, okay, yeah, let's take advantage of this wide array of players, especially because the hardware, or at least the software side of PS4 and PS5 are significantly more similar than PS3 to PS4. Like, that is something that I understand. At the same time, I don't know, I just feel like knowing that the PS5 is doing this well, it makes it even weirder that we don't really know. I think once we know what God of War is, then I think we can have this conversation a little bit more in depth, because if God of War is still, not still in the sense that they've announced this or anything, but like if it's still a PS4 game as well, that's going to be confusing at this point, I think.
I agree. And I love that you brought that up and that Rob wrote in about that, because that really stood out to me, Dustin, as far as it just doesn't make any sense. This whole line that we've been fed by fans doesn't make sense. And because there are now, and I'm so glad Rob put it this way, Infamous Second Son was a landmark title for PS4 after the launch. It was the first big AAA game. And now Returnal is the first AAA game from launch. And there are more PS5s now than there were during Infamous. So anyway, Dustin, take it however you want. I mean, there's a lot of data here. What stands out to you? How are you feeling about everything? I feel like this is a model of perfect health for PlayStation, frankly.
Right. And I feel like for me, I mean, there's a couple aspects. First of all, it's just exciting that the industry is doing so well across the board right now, whether it's PlayStation, Nintendo, or Xbox, in that our medium of gaming is still like so incredibly young compared to, I mean, movies are still a young medium at over, just over 100 years old, or whatever the dates are. I know it's around that. When you compare something like paintings or music or stuff like that. So to see this like continual boom, especially when, however many years ago, they were like, oh, console gaming is on the way out. It's only going to be mobile games or something like that. It's like, that was beyond wrong, completely wrong. And I'm very thankful for that. As far as the availability of PlayStation 5s, because this is the other thing that stood out to me, is that it just really goes to show, first of all, like I was saying, the popularity of video games right now, but also, maybe people want to be mad at Sony right now for not having as many available for the demand, but they got more PS5s out during a pandemic when there's specifically a shortage on the parts for the machine. I'm sure that wasn't easy. You have to imagine that Sony has people going around and trying to make deals to try to get these parts as quickly as possible. So, I'm not saying it doesn't still suck for the people who are trying to get one, but it's clear that they're working very hard to get as many as they can. In fact, the fact that they've done more than PS4 is just really good. So as far as finding one now, because I do know most of my friends that want a PS5 have one, and they've had one since launch. But my one friend, Brandon, his dad has been wanting a PS5 since launch. And so when they go for sale, when I see them on Twitter, I've been trying to buy him one since launch, and I have not been able to do it. I'm not like, super active on it every time, but there has been multiple times that I've gotten in the PlayStation queue or reloaded Best Buy, and I've never been able to do it. So it's crazy, dude, the demand is insane.
Yeah, it's great news for Sony. I will say two things that contribute to this, I think, maybe both negatively and if you're looking for one still, is number one, Sony did say that they don't expect that this is going to be relieved for the rest of the year. So PS5 is going to be really hard to find. One thing I read this website called Zero Hedge, which is going to be controversial to some people. It's a right-wing economics blog. And I'm very, I'm interested in this stuff. And so I was turned on to this site not too long ago, and I've been just kind of clicking around it. And it's like very deep economic stuff. I don't understand a lot of it. I don't even think about a lot of this shit. But they had a great story about container ships. And now obviously container ships were in the news because of what happened in the Suez Canal and all that. But what they were saying was that, and it was fascinating, I didn't know anything about this stuff. They were saying that it is getting so expensive to ship from China to the United States because there are not enough ships and containers, that people are starting to auction. There's like auctions basically where people are paying 3 and 4 times more money than necessary to get their stuff on ships. And I didn't know this, that a 40-foot, like those typical 40-foot metal containers are about $3,000 no matter what they're filled with to get it from Beijing to Los Angeles, Oakland, or Long Beach. And people are paying like $12,000 now to get on ships. And so Sony's got to be dealing with all of these things. And people are talking about it from the perspective of, well, we manufacture shit overseas. This sucks. We shouldn't do this. And I agree. We should be manufacturing everything in the States. That would be awesome. But in the meantime, that is just another level of what Sony is dealing with, not just the scarcity of chipsets and dealing with AMD and all of that, but and the manufacturing at Foxconn and all of that, but then getting it on ships and sending it on over. And I did not know that. And you would not read that anywhere. But I started going down the rabbit hole, and it's pretty interesting. Like they were saying, like it was so fascinating. They were saying like it's not even a money issue anymore. Like you can pay whatever you want, but you're not getting your shit on the ship unless you plan it out like way far in advance. I had no idea. And this is why food prices are apparently going up right now. So, yeah, just to kind of pull out again, boys, the key numbers. So everyone has them as we go. 7.8 million units PS5, 115.9 million units PS4, $25 billion in revenue from March to March, 1.577 billion PS4 games sold, 47.6 million PlayStation Plus subscribers, and that is up 6.1 million year over year. Sony is in great shape, and I think it put it all in the context when I put on, and people have been saying it on Twitter and whatnot, but when I read it, that they're that's like 60% more than Xbox made. You know, that's like, or I'm sorry, 40% more than Xbox made. It's a lot of money. That's a big difference. And so we are getting caught up in our own hype. And I think I'm more victimized by that than anyone. So I wanted to say congratulations to Sony on that.
Yeah.
Number 2, along with great hardware news for Sony comes software news for third parties. And one of these games is right for Chris. It says, for starters, maybe the biggest surprise hit of the year so far when it comes to commercial success is Hazelight Studios' It Takes Two, which has already surpassed 1 million copies sold since it launched on March 26th on both PS4 and PS5, as well as elsewhere. You'll recall that Hazelight's previous game, 2018's co-op adventure A Way Out, was also a huge commercial and critical success for Hazelight, and its so far only publisher, Electronic Arts. Meanwhile, Team Ninja's Nioh series, which takes a book from both Dark Souls and Tenchu, amongst others, is also a big hit. Nioh and Nioh 2, both PlayStation exclusive games with PC counterparts, have surpassed a combined 5 million units sold. Nioh launched in 2017, Nioh 2 in 2020. Koei Tecmo is the publisher naturally, as they own Team Ninja. Omega Force's newest Musou, Persona 5 Strikers, made by another Koei Tecmo-owned team, has surpassed 1.3 million units sold. It launched on Western PS4s earlier this year, and finally, Koei Tecmo's JRPG team Gust announced that its newest title, Atelier Ryza 2 Lost Legends and the Secret Fairy, has surpassed 360,000 units sold. Came to Western PS4s and PS5s back in January, so a lot of Koei Tecmo sales. I wanted to focus in, though, Chris, on this Hazelight stuff. I'm really fascinated by this studio. Not only because that Joseph Fares guy is really interesting, but because they make co-op only adventure games, and they're huge. When It Takes Two came out, I'm like, there's no way anyone's going to play this game. I felt like A Way Out was like a zeitgeist thing. People were really into it on Twitch. They were really, and it's cool. It's about a prison breakout for people that haven't played it. But this new game apparently is even darker. It's about divorce. And people are really, really digging this, and 1 million units sold for a game like that is no joke. What do you think about Hazelight's nascent success?
Yeah, no, I think they're a really unique studio. They're a studio that's like that just sort of seems to do what they want to do, and they seem really unapologetic. I think the fact that their mouthpiece is in Joseph Fares is essentially like one of the most interesting people in the industry right now. Does a lot to help that. I think at least with the hardcore community that actually follows this stuff. But you know, the fact that a game that is strictly co-op about divorce and has just such a weird premise, and even just beyond the divorce angle, the premise of the game is wild. Just like completely like most people I don't think would greenlight this pitch, but
it's about two parents, right? That like it's about two parents, right?
It's about two parents that become dolls or something. And they have to like work together at their marriage to get through it or whatever the hell.
It's very interesting.
And there's this horrifying book creature with a fucking mustache or something. It's very bizarre, just very weird. And I think the fact that it's doing so well and the fact that this studio seems to consistently is hard to say after only 2, but the fact that they were able to strike lightning twice, is a pretty good sign in the sense that it shows that people are genuinely wanting of experiences that are not formulaic and just the kind of generic kind of AAA framework that a lot of publishers seems to be dumping their money into. People like these weird kind of experimental games, and I think any studio who isn't looking at this as like a victory for creativity in the game space is not looking at it right. I think this is like really cool, and I hope we get more. I hope we get more of this. These weird,
I'm sorry,
experiments.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think Hazelight, Dustin, is got to be an acquisition target for EA at this point. I was thinking about that. I'm like, I don't understand how they're independent still. Maybe they want to be. They've made 2 games. Electronic Arts has published them both. And now the EA Originals label is their indie kind of initiative. But I don't think any of them have done this well, or at least continuously. Like that Yarny game was pretty big and some others. But this game seems to have a lot of staying power. And Dustin, I think one of the interesting things about it to me is 1 million units sold means 2 million people played it, which is pretty big. That's not really... or must have played it. You can't play it by yourself. So I am actually most fascinated in that.
Right. And I think that what is so important about the key to the success of this game and the other co-op games that they've released is that you can download, like I'm looking at Steam right now, and I believe this applies to consoles as well. You can download for free the It Takes Two Friends Pass. And so if you buy it or your friend buys it, you don't have to buy 2 copies of the game in order to play it. You know, one purchase, 2 players. It's one of those things where it just makes sense that that's the way it should be. But there's other, co-op games maybe that aren't this focused on co-op, but I feel like it's just it makes sense. And I really like that that's how easy it is to do.
What do you think about the possibility of EA poaching these guys? I feel like that's got to be on the table. EA doesn't really expand too much anymore, and I know that there's going to be a lot of hesitance in joining EA because of what they traditionally do to studios. But as I noted on Twitter this week, Sony has actually shut down more studios in the last 10 years than EA has. So it might be a decent family for them to join. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I think that you gotta wonder, though, when you have the head of the studio is such a creative type, that he would definitely be hesitant to sign on long term with someone or just any company that may limit that creative output, just because who knows, maybe the next thing he wants to do is really weird or whatever. So, But I think that, but of course EA, just like any other big company, loves money, and so if they found a good partner that is making them a lot of money, then of course.
Yeah, I can't imagine the game is that expensive. These games are that expensive to make. A lot of rumors of continued M&A or mergers and acquisitions happening this year, so we might see more of that. But many congratulations to them, because it's interesting that Joseph Fares joined EA at all. Like when you listen to him talk, you would think that he would have stayed really far away from EA. So you got to give kind of credit to Electronic Arts. They're not as bad, like the old consumerist worst company of the year shit. It was always absurd that EA got swept up into this with like Bank of America, and right. Shit like that, where they're worse than Merrill Lynch or something. Yeah, it's okay, guys.
It's I think it's a first impressions kind of deal. I think when I was young and started paying attention to the games industry for the first time, that was when EA was the worst. It was my impression of them is probably always going to be the studio that shut down Pandemic, Not the real pandemic that exists. That would be amazing if EA shut down the Pandemic.
If EA shut down Pandemic.
Yeah, but that's how I think of EA, and it's a similar thing to the way in a lot of ways Xbox, you know, like when when the Xbox One revealed itself, that was a really bad moment, and it's a moment that sticks out to a lot of people who were maybe coming into the industry around that time, who were maybe started paying attention. That is their first impression of Xbox. It doesn't matter how long they've been around. It doesn't matter how good the 360 was or how like popular Combat Evolved was in 2001. A whole generation of people's first impression is the Xbox One, and that's still going to harm them for that generation of people. There are people who came in, and that's the thing. It's like there are people who are coming in now where Game Pass is huge, and now their first impressions are really positive. So like it really is a matter of timing, and like, you know, when people come in, EA hasn't been as bad as they were in the past, and I'm aware of that cognizantly. But when I think of EA, I still think, like, first thing that comes into mind is like murderers. That's all that comes into mind.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Very well said. Number 3, Sony has revealed May's free games for active PlayStation Plus subscribers, and well, they're nothing to write home about this month. PlayStation 5 players will be able to download Wreckfest, the Destruction Derby game that can be played alone or with up to 24 players online. The vehicular combat title first came to PS4 in August of 2019 and will be free for PS Plus as soon as it natively comes to PlayStation 5 beginning May 4th. It was developed by THQ Nordic team Bugbear, which was at one time best known for its Flat Out series. PS4 players will not have access to the original version of this game, so this is only the PS5 version if you're interested. Instead, PlayStation 4 players will have 2 games to grab: EA's and DICE's Battlefield 5 and Beam Team's Stranded Deep. Battlefield 5, a military FPS, first came to PS4 in the fall of 2018, while survival game Stranded Deep, which looks pretty cool actually, launched more recently in 2020. Remember, add these games to your download list even if you don't intend on playing them now or ever, as you may change your mind later. No reason not to.
Yeah.
Anything stand out to you, Chris?
I can't believe Battlefield 5 was 3 years ago.
I thought the same thing when I researched it. I was like, oh, it's 2019. No, it's 2018.
Wow. That's really unsettling. But,
and what I remember most about it was the controversy about the chick with no arm or something. Wasn't there some like weird controversy?
Yeah. It was like, this isn't historically accurate.
Oh man, it's so good.
But yeah, none of this speaks to me. I tried Battlefield 5. I did not like it. It was just Battlefield 1, but slightly worse in like major ways. So like, I just couldn't get into it. I just want my future Battlefield. I don't know what the hell's taking them so long.
Well, it seems like they're priming for the new Battlefield, which EA did say will come out by the end of the year, or at least that's their intention. So maybe they're trying to slick everyone and prime everything. But Dustin, what do you think? Anything pop out to you?
No, not in particular. I looked at a little bit of this. Is it Destruction Derby? Is that what it's called?
No, it's called
Wreckfest.
Wreckfest. Yeah,
right, and it's a Destruction Derby game. Yeah, it looks. I feel like that might be one that I install and play for like 30 minutes and then promptly delete. And not that it's bad, but it'll be like, that was fun. Now I'm done. Yeah. But who knows? Maybe it'll be my game of the year. Who knows?
Vehicular combat games are interesting. This one requires online play for some of it, so I'm sure that's part of the intention. But another THQ Nordic joint coming across. But no first-party games this month, which is interesting. Number 4. Neil Druckmann, co-president of Sony-owned team Naughty Dog and writer and director of the Last of Us series, has an idea for a third game in the series. Whether or not it gets made, of course, is another thing entirely. Word comes by way of the Script Apart podcast, which Druckmann appeared on as a guest. He noted in part, as transcribed by website IGN, quote, "I don't know how much I want to reveal, but Haley Gross," and Haley Gross, of course, was the co-writer of The Last of Us Part 2, "wrote an outline for a story that we're not making, but I hope one day can see the light of day that explores a little bit of what happens after this game. We'll see." End quote. What's perhaps more surprising, though, is Naughty Dog is actively discussing the possibility of making this game internally right now. This is a sharp change from his attitude after the original Last of Us launched, in which he seemed far more ambivalent about a sequel. But it sounds like they're considering everything, with The Last of Us 3 just one of many ideas marinating. Quote, "After we finish one of our big titles, we take a long time to explore different ideas, whether it's going to be The Last of Us 3, whether it's something new, whether there's some old franchise we want to get back to." Jack and Daxter fans' ears went up. Their Jack and Daxter ears went up. "I would like to fully explore all of those, then look at, okay, we have all of these ideas in front of us. As a studio, what do we want to commit to? Because it's a huge commitment. Monetary, time, passion, talent. So you think about all the opportunity costs that come with that," end quote. Chris, what do you think of this? It sounds like, to me, it sounds like they are seriously considering doing this right away. And that is a pretty big surprise, because I know for a fact that between The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2, there wasn't necessarily the inertia from The Last of Us to get that second game made, and that it was kind of something they had to decide that they wanted to do. I think this is a wise move, as long as they also have something new percolating. And as people will recall earlier, I said Sony is going to invest $200 million into their existing studios this year. So it sounds to me like this is a real possibility. What do you? I kind of feel like I know what you're going to say, but what do you think?
Oh, when I first saw this news, I was immediately sad. I was like, the first emotion that went through my head was like misery. The thought of them spending another 4 years only to come out with another one of these is really disappointing. Because like, I just want something that's like, I don't want Naughty Dog to be like, oh, that's the studio that makes those games that make me feel depressed. You know, like I don't want that Naughty Dog for the next half decade. Like I would hope that. I do think it's interesting that they said like go back to an old franchise, because that could really only mean Jak and Daxter to me. Like I don't know why they would go back to Uncharted 5. Seems like a weird move for them.
Rings of Power on Genesis. Yeah, they
yeah. But I don't know, man. This was unsettling to me. I don't want to Last of Us Part 3. At the very least, not after, not next, I should say. You know, I want to see something new next.
Well, what I was disappointed about was, and Dustin, I don't know if you have anything to say about this, but what disappointed me, I think, a bit was that he said not that they want to do a third one, which is tantalizing to me, but that it's going to take place and naturally after the events of The Last of Us Part 2. And I'm like, damn it. I don't want to say we. I think the biggest untold story is what happened after the fall before Joel met Ellie. We don't know what happened for 20 years. And I feel like to the point of Chris's depression, like the depression that the game brings, I feel like if you go back and you're like, it's year 1 or year 2, I feel like that's depressing and harrowing, but less depressing and less harrowing and actually more interesting, because you see like, well, what happened? I mean, everyone freaked out, but then 20 years and everything is gone. So I was kind of hoping. It's just disappointing to know that that is not going to be the story. I'm curious, Dustin, what you would want, if anything, out of this.
To me, this feels like it. Obviously, it's worth reporting, but in the same way, I kind of feel like it's a bit of a non-story, because studios are going to explore a wide variety of ideas. In order to even consider it, you need to have something. So, yeah, they've got an outline of what the next game could possibly look like. You know, maybe creating that outline is part of the decision on whether or not that's something that they want to pitch. They may as well have a story outline for a new Jak and Daxter game, and they maybe have had it for 10 years. But when they were gathering up what the possibility of their next project is, they said, yeah, we don't like that. We're going to do this outline that we created instead. So as far as it being a sequel, I feel like that is the right move. And it's just, for me, it's like, I feel like things should be in 3. Like, it feels weird to me to just have 2 games. I don't want it directly next, like Chris said. Like, I give it a break. Honestly, maybe save The Last of Us Part 3 for PlayStation 6 or whatever, 7 to 10 years from now. I want something new for now.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we'll get, and Kirk wrote in about this, actually. He says, hi, guys. Since Ben and Naughty Dog are working on new IPs, what kind of games would you like to see from each studio? We've talked a lot about Ben, but with Naughty Dog, I feel like there's possibilities here. And I know people are concerned about this because culturally, and you have to know a little bit about Naughty Dog to know this, but Naughty Dog never worked with producers, which was a famous thing in the industry. They never had a producer. I believe it was The Last of Us or Uncharted 4 that was the first game they ever made with producers. What this means is that producers in the gaming industry are the ones that keep everything organized. They're the doers. So it's not a technical skill. Anyone can really be a producer, but it's about being organized. I'm sorry, Dustin, in the gaming industry.
I would do a weird face
when I was looking to bail out of IGN for a little while back in the day, and I was talking to people about production roles because I don't have technical skills. I could be a producer. A lot of it is just being in documents, staying on everyone's ass, dealing with cert and dealing with the publishers. There's a lot of things that it's annoying. And Naughty Dog never worked with them. They actually made their games without a producer, which is crazy. And when they split into 2 teams back in the day, as we found out during the development of Uncharted 3 and The Last of Us were made concurrent, that really hurt the culture of the studio. And there's a lot about that. I mean, they didn't like that. And they folded back together after Last of Us Part 2 came out, made Uncharted 4, then made The Last of Us Part 2. It sounds to me like they're going to get split up again. And I feel like they've already been split up. What I'm interested in is if they're going to be split up again, as far as like maybe 3 or 4 teams, because it seems like maybe this is what Sony's angle is. We don't need 35 studios. We're going to have multiple teams percolating at Santa Monica, at Naughty Dog, etc. And we already know that they're working on a Last of Us product in Factions. So then maybe they brought in the Last of Us remake, then maybe the new Uncharted game about Drake's kid, then maybe... So like what I'm concerned about, Dustin, is that they might not be able to escape the gravity well of their own IP. No matter how much power they have, Sony's going to go like, I don't know that we should abandon Uncharted. And since you don't seem to want anyone else to make it, you have to make it. And that's kind of, I don't know. I'm wondering if where their head's at. I wish I could talk to Neil more. We used to go out to lunch sometimes to understand this better. But what do you think? I mean, do you think that's possible that they're kind of against the wall where there's just too many expectations, there's not enough slots, games are hard to make, like Neil said, and they have to be very sure about what they want to do.
Right. And especially because Naughty Dog is notorious for being I think during the interview cycle for Last of Us Part 2, that they're like very perfectionist and things. That's why we saw so many delays in this game take so long to make, which obviously was a fantastic game. It won Game of the Year, right? For Game Awards.
Yes.
Right. And many others. But beside that, so it's one of those things where I wonder what the power dynamic is between Sony and Naughty Dog, because as we talked about on this show in the past few weeks, that Naughty Dog is really the golden goose of their family of studios. So I just don't know if they're kind of like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. We don't have the passion to do it. And you know that we make great games when it's something we want to do. So we're going to make you millions of dollars anyway. Right. I'm curious about what the dynamic is between Sony corporate and Naughty Dog leadership. How much sway do they really have?
Chris, one interesting thing in that interview that I didn't put in our story was that Neil had talked about one of the things that is going on with The Last of Us, and he was talking about the TV show and all the other stuff, was a world exists, that there are rules now, and like an established set of circumstances in which the game takes place, the way it operates and all of that. My major concern about them not revisiting it is that it does take a lot of work to reestablish these rules with something new. If we want to see a Naughty Dog game in the next 5 years, that's not Factions, then my one fear is that maybe they should go back to the well now while they still can, as opposed to 10 years from now when they have to kind of reestablish the rules again. They're already in that headspace, you know? So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I understand, but at the same time, they haven't they have a history of doing this. They did The Last of Us, and then they did Uncharted 4.
Right.
So like, I mean, it's not out of the question that they could like maybe move on to something else and then do The Last of Us. And I don't think it would be that big of a deal. In fact, I think it might be to their benefit, because they might, who knows what the hell technology is going to be out by then? Who knows how much more realized their game could be if, you know, this is the tail end of the next generation. Remember, like, it's kind of weird to think about, and I think we all know this, obviously, but The Last of Us Part 2 is a PS4 game, you know? Like, this is not even a current gen title anymore. So the thought of, like, a Last of Us Part 3 towards the end of the PS5's life cycle is a lot more enticing to me as somebody who didn't even really care for Part 2 that much than a Part 3 would be now or anytime soon. And that to me is like the big thing. It's like, I think you want to give, especially given how like dire that game is and how like weird the press was around that game, specifically with regards to the leaks and all the crazy arguments online. I think you want to get a decent amount of distance, and I think you also kind of want to make people miss it. I think too many studios, and this is very true over on Microsoft's end too, with like the Gears and Halo. It's like they're too quick to jump back in a lot of the time. Let us miss The Last of Us before you bring it back, because I think more people will care about it. And I don't know. I just think that's the way to go. Also, because selfishly, I just don't want another one of these so soon.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know,
I feel like I don't feel like we're gonna get. Why? I don't feel like they. I think they know that they probably need to move on in order to also attract some new talent and change things up a little bit. It's probably a pretty depressing game to make.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, do you imagine being at Naughty Dog, being like just like one of the normal like grunt types, the devs, and then you're like, I got to spend another 4 years doing this.
Yeah, it's like you wake up, you get into work at 9 or 10 in the morning, you get your coffee, you sit down, and then you have to animate some dude getting stabbed in the head with a shank.
Yeah, you like dust it. You're just like, all right, time to research gore again. I don't know, like it just seems it seems like genuinely just for the health of their studio. It just seems like they're better off moving on to something that's significantly different first, even if it's just a one-off. In fact, I would love that. I would love a one-off for once. But
my assumption
we'll
is that The Last of Us was going to be that game. I feel like something at some point changed.
Yeah.
It would be nice to do a one-off. I understand the commercial realities of not doing that, but we just got a one-off in Days Gone. And I feel like and I'm not even being ironic, I feel like in some sense that game is actually going to become like a cult game now.
Yeah. I mean, dude, we were just talking about It Takes Two guys. They could have easily done another A Way Out. And that's like a smaller studio. And they were just like, no, we're going to do this weird thing. Like, I want AAA studios to be able to do the weird thing.
They should have done a Way Back In where the guys go back to prison.
Way Back In.
They have to figure out how to go back, commit crimes, and go through the judicial system.
We've got to break into prison.
Number 5. By the way, I want to give a shout out to IGN, my old website here, because a couple of weeks ago I was taking the piss out of them about not manufacturing any news. But this next news story is something they actually did follow up on. So props to them. Number 5. Website IGN has been chasing an interesting story emanating from the furthest reaches of the PlayStation ecosystem and community. The rub is this. It appears Little Big Planet's servers are totally down right now and have been since March. While these outages don't affect Sackboy's newest outing, the PS4 and PS5 game Sackboy's Big Adventures, the outages do affect Little Big Planet and Little Big Planet 2 on PS3, as well as Little Big Planet 3 on PS3 and PS4. It's unclear how the PSP and Vita games, which both share tethers to the console titles, are affected. IGN notes that following the early March outage, only the game's single-player functionality works, which doesn't seem like a huge problem, but is. After all, Little Big Planet's community pretty much only persists to make stages and share them with one another. It's even spawned a social media hashtag #SaveLBP. Worse yet, because neither of the game's respective studios, PlayStation or other entities, will talk openly or consistency about the outages, it's left Little Big Planet fans to speculate. Though a common theme was that Sony simply didn't care. The games were too old and unprofitable to bother, which may be true. Though since IGN's reporting, the official Little Big Planet Twitter account sprang to life to note that the service is being restored, quote unquote, as soon as we can, end quote. The original Little Big Planet was one of PlayStation 3's big first exclusives and was Media Molecule's first game. It launched in 2008. It was followed by a popular sequel in 2011, also from Media Molecule, before external developers Sumo Digital took over for Little Big Planet 3 in 2014, which came to both PS3 and PS4. Cody Smith wrote into us and said, first time writing in and loving the show. Thank you, Cody. Thanks so much. What do you make of the Little Big Planet issues? It seems this has been misreported a bit, but is yet another sign of Sony or PlayStation will abandon its history. Dustin, what did you make of this? I don't know if you followed this at all. I actually was surprised by how little this was reported in more PlayStation press because it's a sign of old game abandonment. This has actually been going on for almost 2 months. And for some reason, no one had really been hearing about this. Do you think it sounds like Sony will be fixing it? But do you think Sony's original assumption was just to ignore this? Because they must have known that that the servers were down. I mean, I don't know how they would have missed this. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm actually on the Little Big Planet Twitter right now. And it says basically server update. Some of you have noticed the servers have been off online intermittently over the last week. This is while we test the new security updates we've put in place. Rest assured, we are still working on resuming the service fully as soon as we can. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you got to wonder if they're testing security stuff, if maybe they found a security vulnerability and they were like, fuck, and just took it down and did not say anything until it was fixed, because we know what happened many years ago. And I'm sure, we've talked about how Sony, still to this day has scars from that and remembers what happened. So I don't know. Maybe that's just a possibility. Just a thought.
That's a good point. What do you think about that, Chris? About Little Big Planet possibly being a vector for attack? I mean, it's possible. I mean, I guess it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know enough about server side maintenance or like vectors or like weaknesses in code that like let you get into storefronts or anything like that. But I don't know shit about any of that. But it wouldn't surprise me if that was like a distinct possibility. These are really, really old games that, I think anybody with any experience playing really, really old games online especially will know that it's just a complete, it is the Wild West out there. I remember jumping into Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, I think like 2 years ago, and people were flying around, man. It was the craziest shit I've ever seen. And it's like, it just becomes like a
hacker's
like
paradise, basically.
Yeah, it's a hacker's paradise. So like it wouldn't surprise me that there might have been a vulnerability. I think it's a bit conspiratorial to say like maybe like they found something and they were just like, let's hope nobody notices.
I like that though. Yeah.
But I think it's more shocking that people noticed, to be honest.
More people are probably playing Little Big Planet than Dreams. So
that's probably
someone
true.
was probably going to notice at some point.
That's fair.
Yeah, because I was thinking in my mind, I mean, just in my little simple mind, I was like, why does this even matter? But then I was like, oh, of course, like Little Big Planet's only relevant because people share things with each other. That's the only reason it's remained relevant. So, and it is cool that they all talk to each other. So when one goes down, they all go down. But I did notice that they didn't bring up the PSP and Vita versions of the game, probably because they don't even know they exist. No one does. All right. Number 7. Oh, wait, is it number 7? No, number 6. I'm sorry, number 6. An eagle eye at website Twisted Voxel discovered something very interesting about PlayStation 5 launch game Godfall. It's almost certainly being ported to PlayStation 4. That's because the website discovered a rating from PEGI, Europe's games rating board, for the PS4 port. Godfall, which was developed by fledgling studio Counterplay on behalf of publisher Gearbox, launched alongside PS5 on November 12th of last year. It also came to PC. It didn't seem to set the world on fire, however, and as a third-party timed exclusive, it was clearly going to migrate off of PlayStation 5 eventually. That it's moving to the previous generation, however, is surprising, though it's unlikely to save the action RPG in an increasingly crowded marketplace demanding players' time. Chris, I thought of you when I saw this news story for some reason, because I was just intrigued what you thought of this. I feel like, I wonder if this was always in the cards or if this is like a play to save Godfall, because I just don't feel like even when it launched, anyone was playing this game or cared about it. I thought eventually it would go to Xbox. I'm sure it still will. But what did you think about this backwards port?
Very strange. Very weird. I don't know if it's it always being in the cards is probably something that is a little bit more likely, because I think they know. These people aren't stupid. They know that there's no saving Godfall. Like, you just, I don't think they're deluded enough to think that. I mean, this is the launch game, right?
Yeah.
For the console. If you couldn't sell a ton on launch, I don't know what to tell you. That's like a big issue. And I don't think going backwards is going to really help that much. So I think this is more likely that they had a PlayStation 5 exclusivity deal. They're like, all right, let's put a lot of ray tracing in this. Let's make it like shiny and fast and whatever. And it's likely that deal is probably expiring soon. And they're like, well, let's just put it on. We're going to put it on other platforms anyway. Especially, I wonder, my curiosity is specifically with these timed exclusives for next-gen consoles, how they're going to act on Xbox, given how backwards focused Xbox seems to be. Man, like, I wonder if they just had like an Xbox One version running, because that's kind of how Xbox operates, and just figured PS4 might as well.
Yeah, because they have to jump the XS and One kind of what do they call it? Smart. What do they call it? I used to make fun of it. I can't remember anymore.
The smart delivery.
Smart delivery, right? Not so making fun of worthy anymore. But
I wonder if that's the case, because I don't think there's no way, like, they have to know that they're not saving Godfall, like there's just no way. No one is talking about this game. Like, more people play Avengers, like, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's Dustin, I think about these games sometimes. These are bets, right? And all games are bets. The multiplayer games are interesting though, because you have to watch your own son or daughter basically be slowly killed. Right? Like, you put the game out in the wild, and unless you're like Siege, like one of these games, or No Man's Sky or something that like gets second life, it's over. like if you didn't hit the first week or 2 weeks, it's over. And then you have to kind of just sit there. I would imagine a counterplay, it's probably pretty scary because they're no doubt waning and they have to continue to go to work and like dump time into this game that's almost certainly dead. What I was surprised about the PEGI rating, it's only a leak, so it could be more, is that I was just surprised there weren't other platforms. It literally is just PS5 and PS4 right now. The question becomes, Dustin, will you play Godfall?
No. Definitely not. And it's, I feel bad for these guys because, I mean, I do and I don't. I'm looking at the Godfall Twitter, and 30 minutes ago, their tweet was about how, in case you missed it, matchmaking is coming to Godfall. Sorry, but in a multiplayer game like this, no matchmaking? Like, seriously?
Yeah, that's bonkers.
That's actually insane.
I don't know. I see tweets from, like, I see tweets from this account every once in a while. I feel bad because I will look at the replies. And people are just brutal to these guys. And I don't know. I've not played it. Man, so maybe it's deserved. But no, actually, no. Some of these comments, it's definitely not deserved.
I mean, yeah, criticize, but don't be mean. You don't have to be an asshole.
You know?
Right.
You don't got to be mean to some like social media manager who's probably just like trying to be okay.
Especially because like they're probably, I mean, I'm not even trying to be facetious. They're probably waiting to get laid off when a game is doing this bad. Like you got to kind of be a little, the social media person especially is going to be like the first person to go. So I'm sorry, Dustin, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, just that I don't know. When you're thinking about like a game like this, you have decisions that you have to make. You have so many resources. So you can decide to put more time into the current version of the game, do some kind of, I don't want to say No Man's Sky, but that's always what it's compared to. It's like if you want to revitalize a game, do it like No Man's Sky. You can either do something like that, but instead they're opting to just put the same game on a weaker platform, which, to be fair, has a much larger install base. But I think that, as I said before with Days Gone, this game just has too much stink on it now. So I really I don't know who's going to buy this on PlayStation 4.
Yeah, like there's so much to play on PlayStation 4 in comparison. And if you couldn't do an amazing job on PS5 when there were only 3 games, I don't know how much better you're going to fare on PlayStation 4, even with the amount of like people who are on there, just based on the sheer amount of competition you have. Like there's plenty of way older games that are just better than Godfall and are far more worth people's money and time. So like, I don't know. This seems to be just something that they were always planning, and it's just like, all right, well, I guess we got to do this. So.
It could be. I also think with the matchmaking stuff, which is funny as hell, that's usually something that's like in a beta. But yeah, exactly. With that kind of information, it tells me 2 things. Number one, they thought more people were going to play this game together and it become more of a phenomenon. But the second thing is that it probably wasn't ready, and they probably literally had to get it out for PS5 at launch because. Imagine, not that we care much about Godfall anymore, but imagine how we would be talking about Godfall or about PS5 without Godfall in there. I mean, it was something else to play, and now it doesn't really matter. But at the time, I think it did. I'd actually be pretty curious to see how it sold, but I don't know that we'll ever get those numbers. No. By the way, Dustin, are you sweating?
No.
Are you sure?
Do I look like I'm sweating?
Yeah, like does it look like it to you, Chris?
Yeah, you look very glistened.
Yeah, you look glistening.
Maybe my light is too bright. I can pull a Colin Moriarty and like fuck with my light about 30 more times during the show.
Yeah, do
you
it.
guys want?
No, you look great. No, don't fuck with your light. I was curious because it almost looks like your face is moiraying in a way.
It is a little warm in this room. It's that time of year where it's like this room is just constantly warm, but I don't feel.
No, you look like $1 million regardless. I just was curious. I was like, go towel off if you need to.
Oh.
Do it on the show if you're going to. Number 7.
Oh, shit.
Electronic Arts' own studio Respawn Entertainment is working on a new IP. We don't know anything about it yet, but that very confirmation is news enough worth noting. Word comes by way of the social media feed of Vince Zampella, the team's co-founder, who points to a job listing posted elsewhere, hiring for a Respawn team, quote, building a new IP from scratch, end quote. With only 2 IP under its belt since its founding in 2010, Titanfall and Star Wars Jedi, with a Medal of Honor VR game in there too. This confirms for the first time that Respawn is working on a 3rd title alongside the ongoing Apex Legends support and the expected sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Both Fallen Order and Apex Legends came out in 2019. Before that, Respawn was known only for the Titanfall franchise that gave us Apex Legends in the first place. Legends. Titanfall came to Xbox One, Xbox 360, and PC in 2014, and its sequel launched on PS4 in 2016. The original Titanfall never came to PlayStation platforms. We're still waiting for that. I think we're going to be waiting forever. By the way, it's who cares at this point. Chris, I got to know. I mean, you're a fan of Respawn fan. What do you want? I mean, this is pretty exciting and unexpected, actually, because we knew they were going to go into Jedi Fallen Order. Apex Legends is probably carving out a lot of time, so we're going to get something new. It's not going to be Titanfall 3, obviously. What do you want?
Yeah, I mean, this is bittersweet in the sense that, like, yeah, it's not going to be Titanfall 3, which sucks because Titanfall 2 is genuinely amazing.
Yeah, it's a good game.
But you know, I think this is cool. Like, this seems to imply that one of these projects either. Well, I mean, Apex Legends is ongoing, so you have to assume that whatever the sequel to Fallen Order is pretty well underway and you know, at least in a complete enough state that they're looking into the future of what they're going to do after, in a serious way. So that's kind of cool. That's good news. I don't know what the hell I'd want to see from them, though, because it seems like they've done a good job of establishing themselves as a studio that can, like, really knock an FPS out of the park and also just nail, like, a third-person, you know, melee-focused Metroidvania in the Star Wars universe. Like, right. I would almost just say, do something that you haven't done before, because it seems like you can do that. You know, like my dream from any studio is a stealth game, quite honestly. But yeah, we're not going to get that. So I think anything that they want to make, I'm all down for, because it seems like they've just got like a really solid group of talent there who's just capable of really making solid shit just constantly.
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting, Dustin, too, for me, is their two games are very different. And they kind of have, I mean, they're owned by EA, but their revenue stream is kind of taken care of from Apex Legends. They're kind of good there. Apex Legends is huge, and they're making a lot of money there. Fallen Order, by the way, is going to come to PS5 this summer, we now know. So it's going to come natively, which is very exciting. And I'm sure it's going to look great and play great. So they're busy with that. But what's exciting, Dustin, is that we don't really know. I mean, you have Titanfall, and then you have Titanfall 2, and those are already different games, because one is a multiplayer only game. One finally gives you a campaign, and it's an awesome campaign. I loved it. Then you move on to Apex Legends, which is free to play, and it removes the Titans, but it's in the Titanfall universe. But then
and it's enormous,
right? And then they make Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is just a Killzone to Horizon move in my mind, which is something Guerrilla did, where you're just moving to something totally different. Thus, and I think this is all on Frostbite too. So they are working with different perspectives, different genres within the engines and the confines of the engine. It's exciting that we really literally do not know what they're going to do.
Right. Yeah, this is a studio that I feel like continually does better and better. The only sad thing to me is that I thought that Titanfall 2 was just so good. The campaign was awesome.
I love the campaign.
And now that they, you know, I feel like with Apex, I'm not played a ton of it, but they've had so much time refining and working on different multiplayer stuff in the Titanfall universe. I want Titanfall 3. I feel like it's with the success of Apex, and now that Titanfall 2 has like this cult quality to it now of like this amazing single player campaign. I just wish for Titanfall 3. Yeah. Maybe someday, probably not.
I'm sure that they will. I mean, here's my theory, is that maybe they introduce the Titans back in the Apex Legends in some way, in some massive update, right? Like, wouldn't that be the next step?
I heard a rumor about that. Actually, my friend told me that the other day, but I don't know where he heard that. So
yeah, Chris, you shake your head no. I mean, you would know more about this. So I mean, does that not make sense with what it is?
I just don't see how they would really do it in any meaningful way. Like, the most that I could see them doing is like maybe they have a character who is, you know, the game's just not built for that. Like, the map isn't necessarily built for vehicles as big as Titans. It's just I don't see that working particularly well. Also, like, battle royales are all about, like, you know, specifically Apex Legends is about like maneuverability and, like, you know, outclassing your opponent. And if you drop this big beacon letting everybody know where you are, and then it's like huge and like an easy shot, I don't think the Titans fit in with Apex Legends. But I am with Dustin in the sense that like I want a Titanfall 3 eventually, and I think we will get a Titanfall 3 eventually. I just don't think it's anytime in the near future, which is, you know, disappointing, but I can wait. But I don't think you're going to see Titans in Apex Legends in any way that's going to like recapture Titanfall 2. You know, Apex is its own thing. It's not going to be, you know, what we want it to be in a new Titanfall game.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dustin, go ahead.
I was going to quick update because I know the comments are going to chime in. Just 3 days ago, the lead designer commented and said that Apex will never have Titans in it because I think of different theories about that. So it seems like that's off the cards.
Yeah, it is. What's so fascinating is that the hook of the original Titanfall was the whole asymmetric Titan, and then like you're on foot and all that. I remember people being really into that, and it's funny that their biggest Titanfall related success just removed that completely, and yet people still love it. It's a good sign for Respawn. I think EA has themselves perhaps a new crown jewel, because DICE is kind of falling behind the wayside. They're becoming more of an engine centric studio. Their last game, like we said, wasn't very well received. Respawn is kind of the shit right now, especially with Fallen Order. I mean, they have two, I would argue outside of sports, those must be the two biggest EA games is Apex Legends and Fallen Order in the last few years.
Yeah.
Number 8, no one is talking about this, which I don't think is a good sign for it, but publisher/developer Capcom has quietly delayed Resident Evil Reverse, a multiplayer-only product that was originally slated to launch alongside Resident Evil Village, which itself is coming to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 on May 7th. So we'll be talking about that on episode 150, 151, somewhere in there. Reverse, on the other hand, won't be coming until some nebulous point this summer. One thing hasn't changed, however. Those who buy Village will have free access to Reverse when it launches, whenever it launches. As noted by website Eurogamer, which spotted the subtle change to Village's website that announced the shift in date, Reverse's open betas haven't gone swimmingly, which could be a contributing factor to the delay. The 6-player competitive multiplayer suite isn't Resident Evil's first online foray in recent years. Resident Evil Resistance came out alongside Resident Evil 3 Remake just a year ago this month. Chris, I'm interested in this for one simple reason here, and the Eurogamer kind of pointed this out, that the Reverse beta was going so badly at one point that they literally took it down when it was still supposed to be up. So why do they insist on doing online Resident Evil games? I understood it a little bit more with Resistance because RE3 is small, and people were, I think, used to RE2's, you know, like some of RE3 takes place in RE2, you know, so it's like, I understood people like was like the same environment. So I understood they did that, like give it a little bit of value. But Resident Evil Village doesn't need value. I mean, if you think about Resident Evil 7, that's a very valuable game by itself. So what do you think about this whole movement with Reverse? I feel like it's a nice idea, but I just don't know that anyone cares. This isn't what people want Resident Evil, like, or in Resident Evil.
Yeah, Resident Evil wasn't meant to be Apex Legends, you know, or like some multiplayer suite. It's Resident Evil. It's what Genshin it is.
Impact. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, dude, Resident Evil 8 is so, it's popping, dude. It is like one of the most popular games. Like I've seen people who don't follow video games that much talking about Resident Evil Village, and it's insane. This is a single player horror game, and it's in the zeitgeist in a way that like I haven't seen many single player games outside of like maybe like Sony first party, and even those, like The Last of Us is probably like the only thing it's like that's been, you know, that's exceeded just like the game space. Like my parents don't know anything about Ghost of Tsushima, you know what I mean? Right. But
it'd be awesome if they did.
That would be wild. I showed it to them and they were just like, this looks cool, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, cool.
Parents, man, they're
Thanks,
the worst.
Mom.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just, you're right. Like Resident Evil 8 doesn't need value. It's already like super valuable. I think it's definitely going to blow 7 out of the water in terms of sales. Like, I think that's just going to happen.
I think so too.
And I don't know what the desire is here, especially because like this Resistance thing that came out like a year ago that made more sense releasing alongside Resident Evil 3 Remake. No one's talking about that now. That's a multiplayer game that died within a year. So like, why do it again? I just don't get it, man. Yeah, it's weird.
I think it's real. I don't know. Like, is it Capcom trying to play in the space and learn something? Is it Capcom trying to like, there's like, I have like all these weird theories when I think about this stuff. Is it like they're just working on net code for the benefit of like Street Fighter, you know, and they don't want to like fuck with it. Like, I think sometimes developers do that stuff where they're like, we don't want to fuck around with like the online of for instance, of a game that people really care about. So we'll mess around with the online of a game no one cares about, and then we'll learn things from that. But Dustin, are you primed and ready for? Are your nipples hard for Reverse or what?
No, I think that I'm looking at the screenshots now because I think I blocked this out of my mind. I think this game, the art direction is just horrible. This comic book, like oversaturated aesthetic is just not really doing it for me. And I just, dude. Are you looking at images now too? Like,
no, I just remember when I saw the trailer, I was like, "What the hell is this dumb shit?" Because like look it up. It's really off-putting because it's not even like Borderlands, right? Where like they from the ground up made this game with a new art style in mind. It's literally just the Resident Evil engine with a stupid filter over it.
Yeah,
it's like an Instagram filter almost, and it's like, why does it look this way?
Oh yeah.
Like they just made a multiplayer game and they were like, this looks really dire and sad. I don't think people are gonna want to spend multiplayer time in this dire, sad world. Throw some saturation on there and throw like a comic book filter over it, and maybe people will think they're having fun, is what it seems like.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't look right. Also, I'm always fascinated by the screens that publishers decide to show, because I know they obsess over that stuff. There's a screen of Leon with a shotgun and he just looks like a doofus. Like in this like his face.
Oh, dude, I'm looking at that one right now.
Like, yeah, he looks like an idiot. Like he looks like an idiot.
Yeah.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of that. It reminds me of that Ninja Gaiden game.
Oh, Yaiba?
Oh my god! No, was it Yaiba? The one that looked all cell shaded and weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the last Ninja Gaiden game.
Yeah.
So that was a Spark Unlimited, wasn't it? And then they went out of business.
Here's the question though, real quick.
Yeah, please.
I think we've like. What is it? You guys touched on this, but with Resident Evil and multiplayer, it goes beyond just Resident Evil 2's multiplayer mode. Do you guys remember Umbrella Chronicles, Umbrella Core?
Yes.
Dude, I remember playing that game at the first PSX I went to, and like walking away, they gave me a little pin that was cool, and I was like, oof, that game is so, I don't know if it's redeemable. Like, it was so bad then, and like, I just don't know. Maybe they want some of that. It's not even comparable. I was going to say maybe it's like, oh, we have such success with multiplayer and Monster Hunter, but it seems like the only time people even partially enjoyed Resident Evil multiplayer was maybe Resident Evil 5.
That's what I was going to say was I think RE5 was kind of like the calling card for what they were trying to do, and that made more sense because it was co-op. You know,
right?
Like,
yeah.
Making a campaign where it's co-op, like all the way through, is cool.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. So optionally co-op, of course. Resident Evil kind of does lose its fear and horror when you're playing with someone else, but I'd rather you give that option than this online shit. Right. So we'll see. Anyway, this summer. Number 9. Remember PlayStation Home. It was a somewhat forward-looking social and game space running on PlayStation 3, built by Sony-owned London studio, released in late 2008, and closed at the end of March 2015. More than 40 million players used Home in one way or another during that span of time, and if a recent trademark renewal is any indication, Sony may be exploring returning to the idea in the future. Website Push Square reports on the European filing, which extends its original 13-year-old trademark through the beginning of 2028. It doesn't necessarily mean Sony will revisit Home. They may just be protecting old trademarks. But Sony doesn't often file trademarks for unused products, though it often files patents for unmade products, which are different things. If this is a real product, it seems likely it'll be something casual, free to play, and perhaps even VR focused, according to some speculation. And Jeff Scott wrote into us about this. He says, hey guys, what do you think about Sony renewing the trademark for PlayStation Home? I know it's probably just them covering their ass, but would any of you want to see its return? I never experienced it in its original form, but I could see it acting as a type of interactive OS for PSVR 2, or maybe a console alternative to VR chat. Dustin, what do you think? You're nodding yes. First of all, I think it's awesome that PlayStation Home was ahead of its time. I was surprised that they didn't bring it back for 4, but I think they should bring it back. I'm wondering what you think about what it could be.
I can't remember exactly what I said, but when we were talking about PSVR 2, I said something about how it needed a social space. That's kind of the new thing on PC VR and Oculus Quest. So maybe I'm willing to go out on a limb here and say PlayStation Home is coming back for PlayStation VR 2. And when it happens, we can use the hashtag Dustin was right.
We could use it.
I'm going to go out. I'm saying it's happening.
It seems, Chris, that a lot of speculation is that this has to be VR related. I wonder if you think that is the case. I would like for it personally to come back for both.
Yeah, I think it probably will be for both. I think PSVR 2 is going to be something that's definitely not going to be as, if PSVR is any indicator, it's not going to be something that everybody's going to have. Like, everybody who has a PS5 is not going to have a PSVR 2. It's not how it's going to work. But, if you can populate a VR social space with people who are on their controllers, just hanging around and just chatting or doing whatever the hell they're going to do in a VR social space, I think that could do really well, because it's a way for players who might jump into home without VR to kind of like experience it also. Because VR, if you see another person in VR chat, I've seen this in like on Steam or in the whatever the Vives. It's VR chat, right?
VR chat,
yeah. Because I've seen people can play that without VR, I think. And there are people who just kind of like, the amount of control that you have over your character in VR is like a lot more enticing when you're sitting there like locked on a controller and you can see all these people doing crazy shit, and it might compel you to get, jump into VR. So I could see it being like a really, really smart way to bring it back. I think it will be for both, if anything, but I do think it's going to be a VR thing primarily, because if it's not for VR also, I really don't see the point.
Yeah, if you're going to invest, I mean, maybe not, but I feel like if you're going to invest in something like PlayStation Home's revival, then it needs PlayStation Home, right? Like, it should just be I really feel like PlayStation, it's funny. If you go back and look at PS Home, I mean, we used it a lot at IGN just to dick around with and make funny videos and stuff, but it was interesting. It's kind of like Second Life, but it was like more than that. There were games in there, and Sony actually made money. I think that they talked about how they actually made a nice little profit. They didn't shut it down until well into the PS4 era, and they never ported it, so it wasn't going to live on. But I'm curious to see, because I feel like obviously socializing is so important. Meeting up with your friends, visualizing each other in this digital space, I think Nintendo has done this better than anyone with Mii's, and so I think focus on that in a casual way is really positive. I'm just curious, like, how they can carry it internally. London Studio made it, but then they actually, as people know, exported it to a bunch of different teams that supported it. So they're going to need to find support for this thing outside. And I don't think the trademark revival is a coincidence, because they typically abandon their trademarks if they're done. So that's like less important than protecting an old trademark. Doesn't really matter if the trademark is in use. You can't make a thing called PlayStation Home. Like, you can't. So them protecting the trademark indicates that it's going to be used again, and they have to revive that kind of filing. And it's different than patents, because patents are protecting ideas. The PlayStation Home idea already exists. So we'll keep an eye out and see what happens.
Yeah.
It'd be a cool state of play, by the way, if they did it for all about PlayStation Home. I'm just going to throw that out there. And there might be video. They might still be percolating out there, but there's one funny video that we made at IGN where Greg Miller was like just following a person around home, and they kept being like, leave me alone, but like typing, and he just kept following him around. And we used to make the stupidest videos. Like, we made the video in MAG where someone kept shooting someone on their own team, and they were getting so mad, and we made this video out of it, griefing people. That was content 12 or 13 years ago. It's fun. Massive action game. Who could forget that?
Damn.
Zipper classic. 256 players. It's actually kind of impressive when you think about it. Number 10.
Oh, yeah.
That was on PS3, by the way. So, yeah, very impressive. And on the old PlayStation Network. Number 10, Sony has been quietly filing global trademarks for something called Soho Engine, which website Gamatsu first reported back in October of last year, when Sony Interactive Entertainment was found to have trademarked the term in Europe. This trademark has since been expanded to other territories, as noted by the same source, appearing in New Zealand, Switzerland, and elsewhere. Switzerland is in Europe, but of course they have their own thing going on. The filings are fittingly vague, spanning software to toys to esports and beyond, which gives us plenty of runway to speculate. The term Soho will be familiar to PlayStation players who were around in the PS2 era, since there was an internal team called Team Soho working during that time. They were responsible for two games in particular, 2002's The Getaway and its 2004 sequel Black Monday, before merging with other Sony assets to form London Studio as we know it today. It would therefore make the most sense that this has something to do with them and their unannounced PlayStation 5 project, perhaps even in regard to their own engine. Sony has long pursued and long used its own engines, which helps them better control development and avoid costly licensing fees. Decima is their best-known product in this regard in recent years. Created by Guerrilla, games like Killzone Shadowfall, Horizon Zero Dawn, and its upcoming sequel, and Kojima's Death Stranding are all built on it. This is all speculative, of course, Dustin, but I feel like this has to do with London Studio. I don't feel like that cannot be a coincidence that they named it Soho Engine. So my theory right off the bat is that this has something to do with London Studio and that it's either a VR engine or a PS5 engine proprietary. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that that makes sense as far as it being for VR because obviously, I mean, there's a lot of crossover, but they're developing for VR is an entirely different thing. So I think that Sony, maybe this is something that they'd be willing to license out for like second party relationships for VR to make it easier on developers to do that. Though, maybe I'm misremembering, but this actually connects to the other news story about PlayStation Home. I heard that there were rumblings that it could be Sony London that's doing PlayStation Home. If it could be happening.
Yeah, so they said what we know about London is that they're working on an unannounced PS5 IP. So it could be. I hope not, because I feel like they need to get out of that space. Like, we don't need a casual PlayStation studio. They should have casual games, but you go buy those. You don't make your own teams make them, because that's not what PlayStation is. But Chris, I'm wondering, do you think that the use of the term Soho is a coincidence? Because when I saw that, I'm like, there is no way that's a coincidence. Soho is obviously like a place, but that term, that specific term is a calling card to a PlayStation 2 team that a lot of people really loved, and a game series that people really loved that was actually supposed to get a third game on PS3, as people know that was canceled. Do you think it's a coincidence or what?
No, I don't think so. I think they could have chosen literally anything, and the fact that they chose that, it seems pretty deliberate. Like, I don't even know how you would make an argument, that it's just purely coincidence.
That would be awesome if it was like, oh, this is Sucker Punch's proprietary engine. It's like, okay, cool.
Just like, whoops, I forgot.
Well, we'll find out. I mean, that's all we have for now. But we know that it's good. I like that. So for people that know this, but particularly out of Naughty Dog, there is a segment that doesn't really get any limelight called Initiative for the Common Engine, ICE. And they are all about hardware and engine work. And they work at Naughty Dog, but they're not part of the team. They work on their own. And so they're always chasing this proprietary stuff. Like God of War was built on the Kinetica engine, which is hysterical when you think about it. Kinetica was like a very early PS2 racing game. So they want to keep their stuff in proprietary and in-house. I think, like we said, that was one of the contributing factors to Days Gone not getting greenlit, because it doesn't run on a proprietary engine. And so they would need to again make the sequel probably on Unreal 5, which would have been cool, but we'll see what happens with Soho Engine. And finally, number 11 is a wrap-up. Website Gamatsu reports alternate history game Sunless Skies Sovereign Edition comes to PS4 on May 19th. So-called Old People Mayhem sandbox game, which looks really funny, Just Die Already, comes to PS4 on May 20th. Bizarre action adventure title Cosmic Top Secret comes to PS4 on May 21st. Chinese developed action RPG Wan 7 is coming to Western PS4s this summer. That game looks super cool. I really want to see that. By the way, there was an announcement that PS5 will be coming out in China, but we have no Chinese listeners because they don't have the free internet. Survival RPG The Riftbreakers is coming to PS5 this fall with a PS4 related promise sometime later. Puzzle platformer Out of Line, 2D side scroller Treasures of the Aegean, and top-down car combat title Gear Shifters are all coming to PS4 by the end of 2021. And platformer Babel The Walking Box, unreleased SNES game Nightmare Busters Rebirth, and arena combat game Blood of Heroes are all coming to PS4 and PS5 at an unknown time in the future. Website Push Square reports Capcom Arcade Stadium is coming to PS4 on May 25th, while Capcom developed Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection is coming to PS4 on June 1st, and sci-fi RPG Chernobylite comes to PS4 in July and PS5 later in 2021. It's also confirmed that promising-looking action RPG Lost Souls Aside is coming to PS5 at an unknown point in the future. Publisher Electronic Arts has revealed that its upcoming dodgeball-like game Knockout City will be free immediately for all EA Play subscribers, likely a wise move for a game that almost certainly would have otherwise failed to launch. And finally, developer Raven and publisher Activision have confirmed the obvious. Its ultra-popular free-to-play game Call of Duty Warzone is PlayStation 5 bound, albeit at an unknown point in time. What did you guys think specifically before we move on? Knockout City. That game looks pretty cool, but it was definitely going to die. I think Chris was very wise to put that onto EA Play. Because again, it looks cool, but it reminds me of that, not Rocket League, but what was that other one, the rocket launcher game?
Rocket Arena.
Rocket Arena. I mean, you could just tell me the name of that game and I'd be like, no. You don't want to do that.
Yeah. It's so weird. I wish I could remember the term that they used. Knockout City's the dodgeball, right? The dodgeball one?
Knockout City is that's the dodgeball one. And it looks cool.
Yeah. No, it is. It does look cool, but I remember I can't remember what the name was, but they said something in one of the trailers for Knockout City that I was like, that's a way better name for this game than Knockout City. I wish I could remember. I wish I could remember what it was. I gotta watch that trailer again. But yeah, like the premise of that game is cool, but like it's just a really competitive space, you know. And it did look like another one of those like Rocket Arena type things where like, oh, it's another one of these like not Fortnite looking games, you know.
It just seems like good money after bad at EA sometimes, man. You know.
Yeah.
Like if
weird.
they just focused on. You don't have to make a bunch of games. Just focus on, like we were just talking about with Hazelight. Like you have a champion in Hazelight. You have a few good external developers and some really good internal developers. You don't need to make Knockout City. I feel like these games are actually made to support EA Play, and that's why the subscription models are dubious, I think, in some way, because EA probably feels the need, like we got to feed this beast. You know, we can't just have Madden and Battlefield 5 or whatever, you know, whatever the fuck they have.
Yeah. So. Oh. Dodge Brawl. That's what it was.
Oh, that's great. That's way better.
So much better.
That's way better.
So much better. It's insane. Knockout City. What even is that? It sounds like a Punch-Out game.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was gonna say it sounds like a brawl, like a beat 'em up.
Yeah, like a boxer or something.
Right.
A boxing thing.
I wish it was a beat 'em up. I love my Double Dragon and my River City Ransom. All right. Tradition dictates, boys, as you know, we end every episode of Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, with 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience on Patreon. Patreon.com/LastStandMedia. Please do support us over there. We couldn't do without you, and we thank you so much for your love, kindness, and support of our show. Also on free feeds, we appreciate you too, but not as much. James Donovan wrote in, and I thought that it was interesting because he spells his name Donavon. You would think it would be Donovon. Anyway, hello, Sacred Boys. Now that we've had the console for several months, are you getting any more used to the PS5's interface? I agreed with your complaints at release about the relative complexity of even simple actions like entering rest mode, but I found my muscle memory building up. So now that I can do it with my eyes closed. PS button, left on D-pad, XX. Have any of you had a similar experience? Chris, I was thinking about this recently. I'm glad that James wrote in. I am getting used to it. I must say, I mean, I am getting used to the rhythm. I still say it doesn't work quite right, but I am getting used to the rhythm, the motion of the ocean, let's say. Are you getting used to it too?
Yeah, I mean, I am. I'm getting used to the quirks of it. The issue that I have still, though, is that there are just really small things that should be simple but aren't. Like, I was watching my Series X is in the living room. My PS5 is in my room, and I was watching Netflix in the living room. And on the Xbox, you hold the button, turn the controller off, and then the Netflix keeps going. But like on PS5, I remember like I put on Netflix over here, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna turn my controller off so I save battery. And then I realized that you have to like do the scroll thing to do that. And when you go into the scroll thing, it brings you back out of the menu into Netflix. So like my PS5 controller has to either stay on forever or just be plugged in while Netflix is happening. It's just like little things like that. It's like, why? What is...
Well, I think this was the frustration, Chris, that people were experiencing with the first big firmware update, which was that it didn't really fix anything that we needed to fix. Like,
yeah.
Like, I know that people roll their eyes when I talk about trophies and I try to keep it to a minimum, but it is a fact that the trophy hunting community motherfucking hates that system on PS5, the way they have it. Everyone that is like visible in the trophy space hates it. And what did they do? They just updated it and gave you this weird card. It didn't even fix the problem. It actually made it worse. But those things aside, Dustin, I am getting used to it. I am trying to get too clever by half sometimes. Like when I was playing Outriders, I would like load Outriders, and then Outriders was having a lot of connection issues. So then I'd connect to the lobby, then I would keep it there, and then I'd go like watch Netflix or YouTube and then come back and it would have bumped me out. So I'm still trying to learn all the motions there. But are you getting used to it, Dustin?
Yeah, it's been fine. You guys are basic. Come on, get with the, it's not a big deal. No, I mean, in all seriousness, I've been pretty fine with it almost the entire time. I agree, Colin, the trophies are not good at all, but I don't know. It hasn't really bothered me that much.
Okay. Corey Ramon wrote into us and said, "Hi, team. Can I talk about Xbox, please?" Of course you can, Corey. "There's this narrative that everything they do is golden right now, and I just don't see it, especially when it comes to running their studios. Recently, Jim Ryan was called to be axed in talk of turmoil at PS Studios, which in my opinion was way overblown, especially considering Xbox Game Studios have the following issues. Xbox Games Hellblade 2 only now got a director after being announced in 2019. Perfect Dark director leaves the initiative and joins Insomniac. Rare doesn't even know what Everwild is about. That was a funny one. Halo Infinite lost another director, the third since 2019, and yet not a word of turmoil or mismanagement talk. Nothing seems to have changed over there, so why the silence? Love you guys. Keep on keeping it real. This is interesting, Chris. I feel like the pendulum has swung very rapidly in the last few weeks, and we're in the moment. I was thinking about this. When we're recording this yesterday, Joe Biden gave a speech to Congress, right? And I watched it. And I was like, it's pretty good. I was like, it's a pretty good speech. And then I just turned it off and I went about my business. Today, I woke up and I was working out and I was reading stuff and I'm like, oh, this spawned an entire litany of on the internet, right? Like this man's speech. Most people watched it. They went to bed, they woke up and they went about their business. But there is a group of people that glean onto this stuff because that's what they do. And we're those people in gaming. And I understand that, where it's like our job to be in the moment and in the minute. Yet the calendar has changed so much in just a rapid amount of time with its optics that I can't help but agree with some of what Corey's saying here. Chris, I wonder how you're feeling. Like Microsoft is doing a lot, but yet it is obscuring some concerns with their studios themselves.
Yeah, no, I think mismanagement is a huge problem over at Microsoft. I think, there have been people, I'm not going to obviously name, but like people have come out like at 343 and other studios and like just to message me and just be like, yeah, the way shit ever since COVID, especially like things have been like really just confusing and like really hard to follow. There's like email chains that are just like a complete mess. Things that should not be like personal email documents like being mixed in with like really important like dev. It's a really huge organization problem over there, which makes sense because they have so many studios now. And that is a problem. Like losing directors is a huge deal. I think the issue is that none of these games have come out yet, so we can't tell how detrimental that actually is. It's usually not a good sign, but like Halo 2 was famously probably one of the worst development cycles in Xbox's history. Like one of the worst, like they scrapped that entire game and built it in like 11 months. And it ended up being one of the most seminal games of all time. So it's like kind of an issue where you kind of got to see what comes out of the kitchen before you can really like get all doom and gloom about it. If Halo Infinite is a mess, which, who the fuck knows?
Yeah, how are you feeling about Halo?
Very well could be.
What are you thinking? What are you thinking? You think Halo's going to be a mess? I'm hearing so much of both that I don't know who to trust. I don't have any connections in that world.
The issue is like, I'm not a 343 fan in the sense that I didn't really love any of their games, but they haven't been bad outside of like the MCC and how that launched in like a really terrible state. I have confidence that Halo Infinite is going to be at bare minimum good. But whether or not it'll be great is like a whole nother fucking, it needs to be great is the thing.
I agree.
Like it can't just be good. So I agree that like, yeah, there's a big problem over at Microsoft as far as like, retaining talent and communication between their studios and communication even within studios. But we would complain a little bit more about that if we could see the effects of it. And right now we just don't see it. But we will. We will soon. Yeah. Sometime this year, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think Halo's going to be the sign. If Halo's anything worse than good or very good, it's going to be bad. For them optically. Dustin, how are you feeling about this? I feel like Corey makes some interesting points. I feel like Microsoft's making so many good moves. This is where optics and marketing matter, and this is where Microsoft does better because they've been able to obscure some of these issues. Of course, the Everwild thing was wild. I pardon the pun, but like hearing about like they didn't even really know what the game was, and Hellblade 2 just getting its director, which is bizarre. And he's talking about Perfect Dark. Drew Murray is the guy he's talking about. A funny story, although he's talked about it publicly, is that he got that job at the initiative because of me, which is funny. So Drew Murray was the co-director of Resistance 3 and worked at Insomniac for a long time. He came to Santa Monica. He was leaving Insomniac and taking some time with his family, and he came and met me in Santa Monica for lunch. And I was like, did you know that there's a new studio and a new Xbox studio opening up called The Initiative? And he's like, no, I didn't know. And then he looked into it and he applied and got hired. And then he was like, it's so funny. It was because I had lunch with you that day. it's worth noting he took a demotion to leave that studio. He went back to Insomniac as a designer. So I don't know if he did that because he wants more family time, Perfect Dark, whatever. I don't know. But do you have any closing comments on this one, Dustin, before we move on?
Not too much, other than I think that, Colin, the conversation we had the other day with, we were on a podcast together, Game On Daily. A lot of it, I think, comes down to how Microsoft can manage now that they have so many studios. Now, some people have pointed out, like, Bethesda is its own umbrella. I kind of buy that and I kind of don't. I think the idea of like, oh, we're going to let Bethesda do their thing, only it's going to be under our platform. I just don't see that working out long term. I think that Microsoft will kind of absorb all of them just for more control. Maybe they won't, though. I don't know. It's just anytime a company's like, we want them to keep their culture. That's like famous last words. And then they eventually just...
Especially with Microsoft. Because we've never seen a publisher buy an entire company quite like that. THQ Nordic gobbles companies up like that, but they're not Bethesda. But to THQ's credit and to Koch Media's credit, they do keep everyone separate. There are, like, Saber Interactive, for instance, is its own vertical. THQ Nordic is its own vertical. Deep Silver is its own vertical, etc. So keeping it separated like that is probably pretty wise. And hopefully for Bethesda, they do remain alone. And I think Microsoft would be wise to just leave them alone. Just let them do what they do. I mean, they do make money. So we'll see.
That would be ideal. But, like, you know, again, it all comes down to this fall with Halo. If Halo somehow, after this tumultuous development cycle, is great, that's scary, actually. It's
a good sign.
That's a good sign for them, but that is actually like a huge, like, if you're like Sony, right, and you see like this tumultuous dev cycle lead to something that's great, that's probably terrifying. Because, like, that means it's like, oh, well, like, there's no, you can't predict them.
Yeah, chaos.
At all,
just chaos reigns at that point. Definitely.
Yeah.
Ryan Gerson wrote into us, guys. He says, howdy, sailors. I've been replaying God of War 2018, and it's better the second time around than I remember it being. It feels so far and above most other games that it got me thinking, what is a next-gen gaming experience, really? We talk about this once in a while, but now that we're here, let's really focus in. Is it just games looking better, better frame rates, more systems interlocking in gameplay? What can be done at this point to truly make a game more interactive? Have we hit the ceiling of what we can do by pressing buttons and moving the sticks? Thanks for all you guys do. Tell Chris to accept his destiny and become the dwarven Puerto Rican czar that this world desperately needs. So mixing up a lot of Russian.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So
that's a cacophony.
That is a cacophony. That is indeed a cacophony. So I love this question. I love revisiting this question every so often because I think our expectations of these things change. And since we're on the eve of actually playing Returnal for ourselves, I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about, like, what do we expect out of this game that will make it next gen apart from the way it feels, the way it looks and runs. Chris, do you have any answer for this? And it's a valid answer to say, like, I don't know, because I really, apart from, we talk about AI and all that kind of stuff and kind of more interactivity, I don't know the answer to this. I feel like we're going to know when we find out.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it's getting harder and harder to distinguish generations, not only because, you know, games have looked pretty good for a while now at this point. I would still say that a lot of PS4 games look stunning, even in comparison to some, you know, PS5 games or some PS4 games that have received PS5 updates that I've seen. So graphically, it's not really the deterministic factor. Frame rate probably is ultimately like the most visually obvious thing. Like the second you're playing like multiplayer on a console at 120 FPS, that's a noticeable thing and a noticeable boom. But I think it's just getting harder and harder to see the shortcomings as well, because I remember when Mass Effect came out and they were hiding loading screens in the elevator, you know? And I remember thinking, whoa, that's crazy. Like, you don't have to put a static screen on screen to load something. Wild. And now we don't even have the loading to worry about. Sure. And that was always the biggest thing. That was always the biggest tedious thing about video games, especially back in like the PS1. PSP was like famous loading machine. But I really don't know how you distinguish it now. The seamlessness of it, maybe like a seamless experience, never having those awkward periods of gameplay where you're just sort of slowly moving in like like in Final Fantasy VII Remake, where you're just like slowly moving in between this like really narrow opening just to hide loading for next levels. Maybe that, but even that, it's like if it's not there, you might not even notice that it's not there. So I don't know what makes a next gen game really next gen outside of frame rate, to be completely honest.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think Dustin, about Chris's point, it's tough to identify now. I think about stuff like what Shadow of Mordor was trying to do last generation, and kind of that kind of behind the scenes stuff, but it's hard to identify what it really means right now.
Right. And I think that what Sony at least pitched to us as next gen was the ultra fast loading, which I think we have seen. Like when you start up Miles Morales and it's like you're in the game in seconds, that feels next gen to me. And this was especially apparent when I was playing Nier, actually, because you'll go into a building and then you have to wait like 5 seconds for it to load in, which I'm sure that there's other modern games that are like that, but I was like, ooh, I don't like that. Not one bit. But the question is that it's going to happen, or the question is for me right now, is they sold us during the Mark Cerny Power Hour that certain games were only going to be possible due to the speed of the SSD. It seems like that's going to be the case with Ratchet. They keep, the jumping through dimensions and stuff like that. So maybe Ratchet, that's where the proof is going to be in the pudding on that game. Is that really, is Ratchet the PS5 game that's only playable and could work from a gameplay standpoint on PS5?
Indeed. We're going to find out. I'm so excited for Ratchet. We'll see, I guess, with
Returnal.
With Returnal as well. If we'll glean it out. I haven't read anything about it, so I don't know yet what it does.
I have no idea. I don't think it's going to be one of those games that's going to feel like it's going to be impossible. Like Returnal, even just from looking at it, looks like something that, it looks really cool, but it also looks like something that could run on a PS4, albeit just like maybe at a low resolution, maybe a lower frame rate. Like it doesn't look as earth-shatteringly crazy as like Ratchet does with like the instantaneous loading of new environments and stuff like that. But like at the same time, I haven't seen much of Returnal, so maybe there is some stuff like that.
Definitely not. We'll see what happens. Very excited. Hours away as of the time we're recording this. Mitch Arabco wrote in, and this is an interesting question. He asks about a particular person, but I want to talk about it a little bit wider. He says, "Hey guys, this message is specifically for Colin. We can all talk about this though. Just curious about your thoughts of Greg Miller, my old co-host back in the day, hosting E3 this year. I was a massive fan of Podcast Beyond since you started, but fell off for some reason when you guys started Kind of Funny Games. I heard the news that you were starting your own company and hopped back onto the Colin train and haven't looked back. Choo choo. I guess is that the break? I think that would be the choo-choo. I guess I'm mostly just curious about your guys' current relationship, as I wasn't following anything that happened during the split. I know it's a bit of a personal question, so I don't want to get into any of that. It doesn't matter. I feel like something Mitch asks is really interesting. Our thoughts on people in the industry crossing over. And I was thinking about this a lot this week because I saw Greg and other people are hosting E3 and doing all this, and this is not anything new. But I am personally of the mind that you can't, it's pretty weird to have it both ways. I think Greg is maybe one of the only people that is capable of doing it because he has that kind of respect. But I don't think you can be necessarily a critic and then work in the industry at the same time. I don't think whether or not you think it does, I think it obviously paints your opinions. It narrows in your ability to criticize. And I would get concerned about that. And I have a little bit of experience with that because when we started Kind of Funny, we would actually take a lot of these hosting gigs and I hated doing them. And everyone knew that I hated doing them internally. We did it because we were afraid we didn't have any money, which wasn't a problem after a while. But we would go to host the GameStop Expo, but I would talk about shit about GameStop constantly. And it felt like they didn't ask me not to, but it felt like nonsense. It's like, okay, I talk about shit about GameStop all the time. Now I'm going to host GameStop's thing this week. And then we're going to go back and I'm going to talk shit about GameStop again.
Yeah, and it feels hypocritical.
Exactly. So yeah, do you feel like you can have it both ways, Chris? Because I feel like if someone is hosting E3 or someone is hosting Gamescom, hosting Comic-Con, whatever the case might be, I don't know that you can really trust what they say. I like it's there are different tendrils, and I'm speaking from experience. It's harder to shut that stuff off in your mind, even if you want to, than you think. And I admit those things when they happen to me. I said on Twitter last year, or I said it on the show, that I was afraid to be too critical on Twitter about The Last of Us Part 2 because I didn't want to hurt Neil Druckmann's feelings, who's a friend of mine. It didn't stop me from saying what I needed to say about the game, positive and negative. I knew that wasn't the appropriate venue for it. What do you think? I mean, do you have any thoughts about this, Chris?
You need a very specific type of personality to do that. I feel like you got to be like Ricky Gervais, you know, at the Golden Globes to really get away with doing something like that. You know, like the way that he just like went up on stage and just roasted everybody as he awarded them. Like, I think that's kind of how you have to do it. I don't know if the industry would really allow for something like that, but it strikes me as like that's the type of person that you need. Somebody who, like, if somebody was going to host, they would have to host purely as authentically as themselves, which is just not how that works. Those are press junkets, essentially. These are meant to ultimately to advertise. And I don't know if any company would be open to just, especially with how many studios and publishers have just pulled some really shady shit and everybody knows about it. I don't know if that's even an avenue that's even possible. So no, I don't think that you can really, I don't think you can be a particularly well-respected critic and host.
Yeah.
I think that's, it takes a very special kind of person to do that. And even if you could have that person, the industry, I don't think would even be open to that person anyway.
It's interesting, Dustin, because I think Chris is absolutely right. You're nailing it this week, Chris. You're bringing up some salience. I'll tell you what, boy.
Whoa.
But yeah, it's a good point. It's hard, Dustin, to split the difference. It's not a commentary on the people who do it. They're chasing the paper and all that, and I appreciate that. I do too. But I think that there does come a point where it's like, well, again, can you really believe it? Even if they believe it, it's still somehow subconsciously, I think, tainted. And it reminds me a little bit, you know who this reminds me of? I mean, it's a little bit of a non sequitur, but it reminds me a little bit of Joel McHale, who I'm a big fan of. When Joel McHale hosted The Soup, it gave him incredible credibility because he was just making fun of everyone. And he was outside. It was funny. When he joined Community, he lost his gravitas as far as I was concerned. That show wasn't as funny anymore and all that because he was on the inside. You can't have it both ways, you know? So am I wrong?
No, that seems right. This is such a difficult and hairy situation, I think, for a lot of reasons. And it's easy to get weighed down in particular wording, I think. And I think sometimes the wording is important. Like, is it appropriate if you have a brand or some kind of deal? If you're on a publisher's payroll at the end of the day, maybe it's not consistent. Maybe it's a one-time check they sent you. I can't see any reality where it's appropriate where you use the word review and one of their products in the same thing. Like, and I've seen a lot of people do that. And I think that's odd. Like, you got to wonder, like, where does review and like discussion and things like that, like what lines do we draw? And as much as I believe that I think the Game Awards is better than ever, and I think that Jeff Keighley is doing a good job in most ways, if you look at a lot of the people that are voting in those awards, they have a lot of branding deals or sponsorships, hosting gigs, whatever, with those companies.
Indeed. I voted for Game Awards the same year that I was sponsored by Square Enix and PlayStation and other things that kind of funny. And yeah, it is weird. That people don't care is weirder, though.
Well, I think that just people don't even think about the judges. They don't go to the Game Awards website and see who are the people that are actually voting on these things. And so I'm not conspiratorial about this, but there's a possibility that a company could say, okay, who do we want to work with to promote these products? Even though they say that they're non-biased, maybe at the end of the day, we choose to work with these people who maybe vote in these awards or whatever, or something like that.
It could be.
It's like maybe like these like micro, like pushing one direction or the other. Like you said, Colin, like as much as you are unbiased about The Last of Us, or you try to be unbiased about The Last of Us Part 2, and I think you did the appropriate thing. You were upfront with everybody. I'm friends with Neil Druckmann. My opinion may be tainted, or whatever word you want to use, by that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it stopped me certainly from saying quips on Twitter. It did. And that's why I admitted it. I was like, I knew it, and I admitted it.
So if you're making $20,000 or more, because some of these brand deals can be a fuck ton of money.
Hell yeah, they are. I'll tell you all about that. Yeah.
It doesn't, you can try to be unbiased, but when the bottom line of your company depends on these deals, it's a problem. I'm sorry. Like, I mean no disrespect to people. I just don't, I think it is ethically wrong.
Yeah.
It creates inauthenticity, because even if you did, if you had friends who worked on a game or whatever, or like if you were friends with the person who directed it, that might stop you from saying anything like particularly negative on Twitter, but it might also, in some cases, might lead to an overcorrection where like maybe you're even harsher on the game than you otherwise would be because you feel like you have to make up for the fact that you're friends with these people. I've seen that happen too, and it's just the nature, it's just human nature to just not want to be a dick to people that you're familiar with and people that you get along with. And, criticism can be uncomfortable. Like it's uncomfortable to criticize the people that you consider friends or consider friendly. So taking a hosting gig, I don't think it's on the scale of ethically wrong. It's not that big of a deal.
I guess the question for me though, Chris, is that sure, a hosting gig, I wouldn't say, like you said, it's low on the scale. But if that's a major source of revenue for your company to do this repeatedly, or, and I'm not calling out anyone specifically at all, because a lot of people have all kinds of, and it's not just hosting, different kind of branding deals and stuff like that.
Yeah, ambassadorships and whatnot.
Right. If that's the backbone of how you survive, then that is going to impact things.
Of course. I'm sorry.
We're very blessed by our audience that we don't need to do that kind of thing. So I it's one of those things too that I'm just like, okay, so there's the companies out there aren't able to generate their income like we do. It's not easy. It's I don't want to say our success is a fluke. I don't think that, but it's rare. So
definitely,
I don't know what the option is then for those companies or those critics to survive. So it's a weird situation.
I mean, I'll give you insight. I mean, this was a long time ago, but when I was there, I think I've told this story, but 2K hired us to do a 5-minute video for Civilization 5. They wanted me to go to Baltimore, which I think is where Fair Access is, or Maryland, and do this, like host this video. I refused to do it. I didn't want to do it. So Greg ended up doing it instead, because I remember saying at the time, I didn't leave IGN to do this shit. And we made $25,000 doing that. It took literally 2 seconds. I mean, this is the kind of money that's being thrown around. So Dustin's right. And I feel like I would never want to be in that space again. It's too much. Not dealing with publishers is so nice. I saw Maddie actually tweeting about this the other day, about how stressful it is that he deals with publishers and then some of them don't answer and stuff, and they don't know where you stand. And I'm like, the best way to deal with that is just not to deal with them. I haven't even emailed with a publisher in over 2 years for any reason at all. And our show is bigger than ever. So I think people think they need that kind of access. And I think a lot of, frankly, less interesting people that are still starting out need that kind of access. But for older folks that have been in the industry for a while, I think you either hang around by the market or you go. And I get really uncomfortable when it's like, I'm a Cyberpunk ambassador and I'm an Xbox ambassador. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And why is it in your Twitter profile? So I agree with you. We're like sponsored by Astro Headset and all of this. And I'm like, well, we do ads, but I don't know. I feel like it creates so many different tendrils of people that you're in some way beholden to. And I wouldn't want to be in that situation. Square Enix used to sponsor our Kind of Funny party every year, and it didn't affect me, but I could see how, like, if you're a human, it just sinks into your subconscious in some way. I'm glad that I'm outside of that. Like, that's the thing that I am most glad about, is that the audience is so kind to us that we're able to succeed, frankly, far above and beyond what I was doing at Kind of Funny without any of that. So thank you. Cameron Box wrote into us. Said, hey, CNC with the occasional Furman. Recently, I've become a bit obsessed with From Software. Demon's Souls was the first thing I played on my PS5. I debated it for a while because I generally get really mad on games when I die constantly. However, I quickly grew to love it. So I platinumed it, then Bloodborne, then Dark Souls 3, then Sekiro, and now I'm working on Dark Souls Remastered. I noticed you skipped the second one. I've tried to play the other games in between them, but I just can't. Every time I get an hour into another game, I just get a craving for more Souls. Much like how someone with no taste in food gets a craving for Five Guys. That's not very nice. I feel like From Software has just ruined other games for me. Has this ever happened to any of you, where you dive into a franchise and become so obsessed that you just have to consume it all, and it influences your view of every other game? Dustin, I thought this was an interesting one for you, although Chris will certainly have an interesting answer on this as well as he plays. What do you think about this? Cameron is struggling. I mean, he's a Souls man now.
Yeah, this happened to me. This exact scenario happened to me when, this is what I said on my stream, and I'll say it here proudly. Miyazaki will penetrate you right in your mind. And then he gets in there, well, you know, when you play one of these games, and once he's there, he never leaves. And so with Bloodborne, when I finished Bloodborne, it was instantly, I played it again directly afterwards. And then you get really good at playing through the game that you can play through it in a day or something like that, you know? And there is something, maybe it probably applies to other games, but I've heard about this scenario with other people and these, you know, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro. Something about these games is really, really something once it clicks, you know? So I've definitely been there, and I'm curious for you, just because I know, well, both of you, but I guess we'll take it to Chris. Is there games for you that nothing else will satisfy once you beat it?
I don't know if I have this problem. I do have games that I still play to this day that I've been playing for years because they're just so reliably good, and a lot of other offerings from other genres like just don't tend to match it. But like, I wouldn't say that like I've ever been in a situation where I'm trying to play a new game and I just always end up being like sucked back to the same thing again. It's usually more like I'll play something and it'll be like, this is too hard, I'm done. Or like, this is frustrating, or I'm tired. And then I'll wake up the next day and I'll get back on my normal routine of like the games that I always played. And then maybe that might draw me away from it for too long, and then I just won't get back to it. So what happened with Nier, it's what happened with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like I would play it, and I get to a point where I'm stuck. And I'm like, oh well. And then I go back. I'm very quick. It's like if I get stuck for too long, it's over. It's over for me. I'm not playing this until 20 years later.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's what we were saying earlier, right? Play to your heart's content, exactly the way you want to. I think that's great.
Yeah.
For me personally, I mean, I go into phases. I enter phases. Like when I played Wild Arms 3 recently, which was not fun. I was just in the space for it. I would have never tolerated that 90% of the time. But I was just in that space. I was ready to do it. Sitting down and thinking about doing that, even with a role-playing game that I want to play right now, is actually daunting. So I think a lot of it is just, let's say it's calendrical. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's based on the calendar. I bet you it is a word.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all timing based, I think.
Right. Johnny Rosado has the final inquiry for us this week. He says, Dear Colin, I guess no one else is the dear. When it comes to those complaining about game prices, I think one factor has been missed by Last Stand Media. The state of games at launch and how buggy they all seem to be. As a consumer, I don't want to drop $70 on a new game, not because I can't afford it or I think they are too expensive. Devs need to put out games in a playable state day one for consumers en masse to be willing to be paid the increased price. Thought this was a very interesting point, Chris. What do you think about Johnny's point here? We talk a lot about game pricing, the appropriateness, what you're looking for when you buy a game, but we don't often talk about the state of the game. Whether it's good or bad is another thing entirely typically subjective. But when we see a game like Cyberpunk that simply doesn't work, then I can see why people don't want to spend money. And so is that the thing is that the hill that we need to climb? Games must be better on this front in order to justify the $70.
Yeah, maybe. I think maybe that is the thing. It's like we come from an industry now that is, very common with launching things in an unfinished state, launching things before they're ready. And to have a price hike in the middle of that oversaturated commonality is probably like a huge slap in the face. It's like, okay, we're going to pay $10 more now just so we can get a broken game that you're going to have to patch for like 3 years to get it working again. I understand the mindset here. However, I would push back only in the sense that, was Demon's Souls $70?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's not a buggy game.
No.
As far as I've seen, like I haven't seen any problems with that. Obviously we haven't had a lot of these $70 releases yet. So it remains to be seen as to whether or not what the quality bar is for these titles. We're going to see with Returnal very soon. Hopefully it's not a buggy mess. It doesn't seem like it is based on the reviews, but anything can change. I understand the sentiment. I just think we don't have enough to go on quite yet to make this definitive statement. I think it is reasonable that people would feel kind of a little slighted given how often games are released in like really poor states to then be faced with like a price hike. But so far, the only game that I've seen with that price hike happens to be one of the most functional, stable games that has come out.
Yeah. It's a good point.
If that changes, then you got a pretty good case. If there's a $70 game that comes out real soon that's a mess, then absolutely, this sucks. This is stupid. But for right now, it seems to be almost like, and this is based on one game, by the way, again, so it's not a trend. But it seems like $70 seems to be a mark of quality.
Yeah, it's an anecdote, but you're right. I mean...
Yeah, at least so far.
That's the thing, Dustin. I think Chris makes a great point where maybe the fear of dealing with the ramifications of just the $10 increase has instilled in publishers and developers a more completionist mentality when the game comes out. Not so much the developers. They always want the game to be done, but I think that might be true. Like when you have to justify it, right? So maybe this is the justification we need.
Yeah, to me, I feel like there's a simple solution to what Johnny's saying here. He's saying, I don't want to drop $70 on a new game, not because I can't afford it or I think they're too expensive. It's because devs need to put out games in a playable state. Okay, so wait 24 hours after the release of the game. And if it's buggy and not playable, go on Twitter, go on YouTube or something. And if it's not playable, don't buy it. Like that sends a message to that developer because they don't have your money. And if a game is playable and great, then go out and buy it, Yeah. And you might even, depending on how far, there's different levels you can go with this. You can say, okay, reviews are good and it sounds like something I like and the reviewers didn't have a problem with it. Fortunately, that's not a failsafe because we've seen games that review well, Cyberpunk, and then they come out bad. Which is why, if you want to take it to the safest level, wait 24 hours.
Indeed, wait for the patches and all that,
Yeah, that's the obvious worker. I think it really is just like a collective yearning for a period of time where we could expect something to work well on launch.
Sure.
Like, I think it really is just that everybody just wants to be able to, I want to be able to pre-order a game and have at least the base expectation that it's going to function. People take risks on that stuff all the time. It's not a matter of whether or not you'll absolutely love it. Like people go to movies opening day, like because they're just excited to see it and maybe they don't like it, but at least the movie is finished. You never leave the theater being like, I can't wait to see the ending in a few years. Like it's usually the movie is a movie and whether or not you like it is totally subjective. But in games, it's like the only time where it's the only industry really where you can pre-order something, go in on day one, and it might not even be all there. And that might be the frustration, because this isn't a thing with albums. This isn't a thing with, although I guess you could argue like bonus tracks or whatever on iTunes, but
they're usually
it's a very different
and stuff. You're not really losing anything,
Yeah, you're not losing like a high quality single on a bonus track for iTunes, but it's like it's there is something to be said about the frustration in how different games are in that sense, because we should really be able to look at a game before it comes out, be like, that looks interesting to me. Why not? I'll get it on day one. You should be able to do that. But the fact that you can is the thing that is frustrating to people. And I understand that.
It's funny because the only movie I ever remember, not that I'm like a cinephile, but remember they did Patch or whatever, Cats. Remember that was the one movie I remember where they were actually fixing after it was out. But I think you're right. It's almost like an immovable object meets an unstoppable force, right? One is the price, one is customer expectations. This might be the point in which the rubber hits the road for this. And so I think Johnny makes a good point here, and we'll continue to chronicle it because the fact of the matter is we're still not in the $70 space per se. And we might not be for a long time. So, all right. That's all we have for this episode of Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. Good episode. Chris, you have any closing comments?
Man, I'm starving.
Jesus.
I know.
You have a worm in your stomach if that's true.
No, I'm fucking around. I think I realized recently that I didn't know this when I was talking about Oddworld, but apparently like I have two friends in it. So now my opinion doesn't matter, even though I didn't know it.
Yeah, Matt's in it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Matt and my friend Kitticarus over in the UK.
Nice.
So it's like, oh, whoops.
Very cool.
Whoops.
Yeah, Oddworld is still cruising on. Dustin, do you have any closing comments?
I feel like, what is it, a lobster or no, it's a frog that is slowly boiled because it has now become, I'm looking and it's 81 degrees now in this room.
You gotta get some AC going on in
dude,
there.
Here's the problem. I have a window air conditioner, but it's too loud. I can't keep it on.
No, I understand that. Yeah,
So
I totally get that.
I got to figure out a solution.
In my bedroom, my dad is so cheap. In my bedroom when I was growing up in the 90s and even in the aughts, like in high school, I had an AC unit from the 70s. It literally had a like 1975 date on it or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was so loud. It was fucking nuts. You couldn't keep it on and even think straight. And I was like, God, can't you just go to Nobody Beats the Wiz and buy me a $200 AC unit for God's sake?
Nobody Beats the Wiz. When I moved to LA for the first time, it was so hot and our AC was broken, and I was crashing on the couch, and I remember it was so sweltering at night that I would put my blanket in the freezer, wait 10 minutes, run for it, wrap myself in the cold blanket, and try to pass out.
Wow.
Before it got warm again.
Man, oh man, there's a lot of questions to ask about that, but we're going to save it for another time. Boys, thank you so much for your time today, though.
Yeah.
Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show, Sacred Symbols. Remember, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, laststandmedia.shop for merch. Leave us nice reviews on iTunes and other podcast services. Thumb us up and leave us nice comments on YouTube, etc. and so on. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.
See you later.
Take care, guys. Get out of here.
Get out of here.
Get out of here.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and Burbank, California, USA. The show was conceived by, is written by, and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Chris Raygun Maldonado. Sacred Symbols' executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.